Well, hello guys, and welcome to the Westin podcast, where we're going to get the world's leading experts over for long-term conversations and going to get all the tips and tricks over to you in any type of lure fishing. It's going to be absolutely brilliant. Today, I'm delighted to announce that I've got Jörgen Larsson on the podcast, all the way from Sweden, and we're going to be talking about everything to do with perch. We're pitching this as the world's longest perch podcast. So let's get into it. First of all, welcome Jörgen. How's things over in Sweden?
Thank you, Tom. It's fine. It's a little bit grey and winter mode at the moment. We had a period with cold weather and snow and ice that stopped the fishing, but I hope to go out again next week. So back to the fishing with the mild weather.
Oh, back where we love it, cold water perch fishing. So a little bit about today's format. We're going to get straight into it. And I thought a good way to start this would be to get Jörgen to take us through the seasons. How does his perch fishing change from spring, summer, autumn, and then winter? So I think that's going to be a really good section to get us into. And we're going to talk about everything. We're going to talk about stories. We're going to talk about rigs, baits, that type of stuff. We've then got a huge Q&A section, which is going to be fantastic because we've got some of the best questions that I've not seen or heard of before. So that's going to be great in our Q&A section. And stick around till the end because I've got Jörgen to bring along 10 of his top perch baits. That's the juice. That's the bit everyone loves. They want to know what baits are we on and how do we fish them. So stick around to the end of the podcast because we're going to go in depth in Jörgen's not top one, not top three, but top 10 baits. So there's plenty of top information there. So first of all, Jörgen, how would you approach a bit of springtime perching? Tell us about the type of venues you might be going on in Sweden and maybe how you would approach it with the different water temperatures, because you've got your own set of scenarios over there with you've often got ice out. So when does the ice melt? What sort of months do you start your spring fishing? That type of stuff.
I would say that every year is different. The last year we have quite mild winters, but it's not unusual that it's all iced over, so you miss out on the best period. But in the best of situations, you have a mild winter and a mild spring, so there is no ice. I would fish all through the winter and into the spring until the perch starts spawning. Some things have changed here in Sweden the last years. They have made a period with none fishing in the archipelago where I'm fishing in the sea.
Oh, like a closed season, you mean? They stopped the fishing?
At the moment, we are not allowed to fish in March like we did before. March was like the top month for catching really big perch before they spawned in April or in May. So that's a bit of a problem, but we still fish until the end of February when we can fish. And if I thinking about my old fishing when we were allowed to fish in March, I put most of the time in the archipelago. And that is very, very shallow fishing. They move longer and longer into the base, into shallow water, sometimes only half a meter or even shallower. So say from 2 to half a meter, between half a meter and 2 meter, most of the fishing is done. And closer and closer to the weeds, the longer you get into March. And the interesting thing in this period is that the perch can often be tricky. You have days when they really feed hard, and then you have days when it's almost impossible to catch a perch. So it's very, what I say, changing. The fishing is very different from day to day. If you hit the right days, you can have dream fishing with many big perch. But it can also be completely dead and almost impossible to catch a perch when you're getting close to the spawning period.
Well, I must admit that's very much what I've been experiencing recently. I've been on a big perch hunt, and when the water is cold, I think a lot of it is that weather. You've got to try and track the weather. There's no guarantees. It's not like you look at a weather report and it's the right conditions. You think, oh, brilliant, it's guaranteed to catch. You've got to be prepared with big perch fishing to eat a few blanks, I say, and it's just part of it.
Definitely. To be honest, I haven't done so much perch fishing in the spring in lakes. I've done a little bit, and it's more or less completely different to the fishing in the archipelago when you're fishing extremely shallow. The best perch fishing I've had in the spring in lakes has been in quite deep water before they go into the spawning places. So say from 8 to between 5 and 8 meters, 4 and 8 meters with bottom. And it seems like they stay out in the deep and eat and hunt, and then when it's time for spawning, they go in very quickly and they move out again very quickly after the spawning. So that's the big difference compared to the archipelago when they slowly start moving into the base already in the autumn and winter.
And go on, I think I know the answer to this, but a lot of people won't, because it's very, very surprising when you talk about the water temperature being 0.5 degree to maybe 2 degrees in the archipelago in the winter. Why are they in such shallow water? 0.5 meter to 1 meter deep. That's crazy.
Yeah, and we've even had days when it's been below zero. I mean, this water is brackish, so it will not freeze at zero. So we've had days with minus 0.7 degrees and still fishing in open water. And I think one reason is the food, and I think another reason is the fresh water. It's getting a little bit fresher the further in they come in the base from melting snow and ice, and also rain, and of course small creeks and rivers coming out. So I think they also search for the fresh water. It's easier for them to stay through the winter in water that is a little bit more fresh.
Yeah, because it's very. I mean, we had the most magical session on the archipelago. The first time I ever went there with you, it was pretty much a dream come true for me. I met up with you. We had a couple of days fishing. We filmed it. And I'd seen all of these pictures of these immaculate perch. The colors on them are just next level. The olives and the greens and the black and the red fins. I think they're by far the best looking perch in the world. And some of your photos in particular are just stunning. And what a time we had. It wasn't necessarily easy. We had, it was a bit of a grind to start with, and then we really got into the jerkbait fishing, which flicked a switch for us, didn't it? So in that in that cold water period, give us a little bit of a rundown, that kind of late winter, early spring. What's a few of your kind of go-to lures, and what are you thinking in order to try and hunt out the bigger ones?
Actually, some days they want, surprisingly, they want like paddle tails. The only key is to fish them very, very slowly. But I fish a lot with the good old ring tees. That's been around for quite a few years. And I often fish them, since we're fishing this shallow, I'm fishing them on a jig head with an offset hook. A very light jig head. Since it's so shallow where we're fishing, the weight of the offset jig head is maybe 3 to 5 grams. So very, very light, because there is still some weed left. All weed will not go away through the winter. It's better in the spring than it is in the autumn and winter, of course, but there will still be weed in that shallow water. So a small, light offset jig head is often the way I fish. Or I fish a Cheburasca with an offset hook.
Yeah, just for a little bit more articulation, a little bit more movement.
Yeah.
Do you think it makes a huge amount of difference, a fixed jig head compared to a cheb?
You get a little bit different action in the lure. I have when the fishing with Ned baits had a breakthrough a couple of years ago. Everyone was fishing them on a Ned head or a jig head for a special jig head for Ned worms and stuff. But quite early, I started to fish them on a cheb.
Yeah.
And that was to get a different action and also more movement on the Ned worms, since it's articulated.
Yeah.
And I didn't see anyone fishing the Ned worms that way in the beginning, but I have noticed now that more and more people are starting to do it. And I often find you catch more fish on the cheb than you do on a normal jig head. But there are also days when you catch more fish on a normal Ned style jig head. And it's like some days they want less movements of the lure, and some days they want more movements on the lure with the cheb. So it can be worth trying.
That's very, very interesting with a Ned in particular. I was always quite famous for not really liking Ned fishing a huge amount, partly because I couldn't really get my head around it. You know, it felt like such a stick non-movement. I just couldn't really kind of understand what they were up for. And I actually remember writing a bit of a post. This was a good number of years ago round, and it was on one of the Facebook forums, and I said, guys that are into Ned fishing, I said, what is it that the Ned, why is the Ned so popular? It catches so many big fish. I can't deny that. But and I literally said, it's not like it does anything. And the first comment back was, that's the point. You don't, it's the lure with it's more, less is more. You know, the little tiny movements, that sticky sort of bait, a little tiny vibration to the tip, but actually they don't. And I often wonder, especially in that cold water, when they probably haven't got, it's not like the summer, it's not like they're super active, you know, when they look at something and they think it might be a prey item, if it's got a load of claws and a load of appendages, I'm sure they look at it and think, I'm too cold. I can't be bothered with something that looks like it's going to fight back. And I think they're really interested in something that hops and moves a little bit, but then doesn't look like a great deal of effort to actually go and eat. So yeah, quite an interesting breakthrough I had a number of years ago.
I agree, Tom. In the beginning, I had the same feelings. That was the most stupid lure I've ever seen. And but once you understood what was going on, it was maybe the best lure that ever been made, because it can be fantastic all through the year, but especially when it's cold in the water and the fish is inactive. And it can be a fantastic lure for the spring fishing also, when they don't want any movement like a paddle tail or a curl tail. So I've caught a lot of big ones on the Ned worm. One interesting thing with this theme about movement in the lure. When we started fishing Ned worms, we had 3 sizes in the program from Westin. We had a 7, a 9, and 11 centimeter. Mm-hmm. And in the beginning, I had best fishing with the bigger models, the 9 and the 11 centimeter, and quite a lot of movement. I fished it quite fast with jumping it along the bottom. And what I've seen, and I've seen in Holland also, especially in Holland with a massive fishing pressure, that what has happened the last year, they stopped biting the bigger nets, and they absolutely don't want any action, jumping and stuff on the bottom. They won't take it. You need to drag it slowly with long pauses. Just drag it on the bottom. If you start jumping it aggressively, forget it. They don't take it. So that's another interesting thing we should talk about here on the podcast, the way the perch adapt and change their behavior and feeding patterns, because they do bloody learn.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm actually going to hold that back slightly because we've got a question in the Q&A section. But yes, I think that's definitely something we're going to get onto. So come on then. We've talked about late winter and...
You can call perch, it's just a fish. They're stupid. They don't know things and they can't see colors and stuff like that. But when you have fished for them a long time, you see so many strange things that you just keep scratching your head.
It's constantly evolving. You know, it's constantly evolving. There's always new techniques. They're always trying to figure out new ways to feed. They're always trying to figure out, oh, I think I've been caught on that bait a few too many times, and they avoid it. So they definitely learn by association.
They definitely learn. That's 100%. But we saved that subject for later because it's very interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so we've done a little bit of late winter into early spring. One question I did want to ask was around spawning. So you said over in Sweden, they're probably spawning in kind of May, June sort of time.
It's a big difference because Sweden is so long. It's a big difference if you compare south to north. And in my area in the south of Sweden, they would normally start spawning in the end of April. But you have waters just a few hours north where they spawn in May and or also into June. And I would say in the archipelago they spawn in April most of the time, April, beginning of May.
And so there, because everyone talks about March or roughly around March, whether you're in Holland, UK is probably the same, maybe a bit similar in Sweden, although you've got a close season now. They're big because they've been feeding and they're turning a lot of that body fat into spawn, the big females. How do you think with the biology of the perch, do you think they're hunting out certain specific areas to spawn? Do you think it changes their feeding behavior? Would you just knock it on the head for a few weeks and then come back maybe in the post-spawn period? How does your kind of fishing and approach to that change?
You see that when you're getting closer to the spawning, they will be more and more difficult to catch, and I think they slow down in the feeding because they need to prepare for something big. It's a big thing for them, the spawning, and it takes a lot of energy from them. So when they are fully loaded, I think they slow down with the eating and go into spawning mode. So they are very difficult to catch. When it's getting really...
In that post-spawn period then, they're not they're the same length obviously, but they're not the heavy weights that we go for. But there is some fantastic fishing to be had in the spring. And I feel like I've had this a lot with pike fishing as well. They want to feed. The water temperature's starting to come up. They want to start... You know, they've had a lot of it takes a toll on their body, doesn't it? They're creating the eggs and then doing the spawning process. They want to go out feeding, putting that condition back on. How does I know you said you don't fish loads at this time of year, but how would your fishing kind of change as it goes through into that kind of May, June, warmer period, like in terms of methods and what are you looking for?
I've caught some really spawned recently or fresh spawned out fish while I've been fishing for the big ones, because all the perch is not spawning at the same time. You can have some perch spawning and then 3 weeks later you have other perch spawning. So there is a period when you have both the big females with eggs and also spawned out fish. And to be honest, I don't fish very much after the spawning because I think the perch need to recover and they don't look very nice. It's just like a big shell swimming around with they can look terrible. It's just I feel I don't want to bother them after the spawning, because they are not in good health. You can see they have wounds and everything.
Yeah.
So I don't fish immediately after the spawning. I wait until, say June or something. I might do some fishing, but that's the period in the year when I fish, when I don't fish very much for the perch.
Oh, fair enough. Well, I mean, it's always a long contested thing, isn't it? You know, do we kind of want to catch them at their heaviest, which is kind of most pregnant maybe, or, you know, they've got the most amount of weight packed onto them. But yeah, fair play for giving them a bit of time then to recover.
I mean, I'm fishing. I've fished a lot in the spawning, before the spawning and into the spawning period. But I feel like the perch is regulating that themselves, because when it's getting close to the spawning, they won't bite anyway. So
Yeah.
I feel that they do the regulation themselves by not being catchable when it's very close. And if we go back to the spawning period, I've done a lot of fishing in Holland, and that is also a special fishing. It could be compared to a combination of river fishing and lake fishing, because it's like big lakes with rivers running through, and the fishing in Holland can also be very different. I remember when we started fishing many years ago, we fished a lot with paddle tails, like 9 centimeter shad tees. And some years it was hard lures, and that was better. But for many years we caught a lot of fish on normal paddle tails and hard lures. And after a while, you could see that the fishing pressure was affecting the fishing. So you had to start using different lures, and creature baits and Carolina rigs and stuff like that became more and more efficient. And the last years it has been extremely focused on creature baits, Ned worms, Carolina fishing. So that's quite interesting. I know that one thing in Holland, it was a little bit the same as when I started fishing the Ned worm in Sweden. We could fish the bigger models, 9 and 11 centimeter, and jump them quite a lot. But the last years, they don't touch a jumping Ned worm, if you call it that. You need to drag it slowly over the bottom. And one interesting thing, when we started fishing with our creek rods, the creature bait, the cray style bait, it was super efficient for the big perch in Holland. Last year, it was 2024, it was absolutely magic. And this year, 2025, you couldn't catch a fish on it. They didn't touch it. Impossible to catch a fish on it. It was only small Ned worms that you dragged slowly and with long pauses. They didn't touch the Carolina rig with the creek rod this season.
And so in terms of them, I mean, we just touched on it in terms of them learning and stuff. Where do you think it might go next then? Because in the UK, we have a huge amount of fishing pressure. We've got very limited venues. A lot of these fish, I often think the big fish are being caught multiple times over. It's not like you're finding fish that have never been caught before. And our classic tactic, I mean, that's part of why I was such a big champion of releasing this super finesse range, is because small lures are so deadly. Like the small creek raw we've now got, the Ned worm slim that's just 5.5 centimeters. Is Holland following in that direction? Because you only get so long on these tricks.
This 2025 spring in Holland, it was the 7 centimeter Ned worm, and also the new Ned worm slim was fantastic. Like a small, thin 5.5 centimeter Ned worm. That was the lure they wanted this spring.
Well, and do you think that's just fishing pressure, or is it also replicating what they eat? Is it are they very much tuned into like small invertebrates, maybe?
I think the perch in Holland are very much opportunists. To grow that fast and to get that big, they need to eat a lot, and they I think they grow very, very fast. I think they eat what they can find, but I think the fishing pressure have pushed the fishing this direction, and I think we will see more and more of that in the future. That you have to scale down to smaller lures and more finesse style. I think that is the way to go.
That's pretty interesting. I've got a little story, not on perch necessarily, but on pike. Here in the UK, the big pike fishing, you wouldn't believe, everyone never really believes me when I say this across Europe, but my best lure I'm talking 3 or 4 years now, for 10 kilo plus pike, mostly in tournaments, that's what I fish, has been the 10 centimetre shad T slim. Fish it on a finesse shad rod, a 10 to 28 gram rod, and the big pike just don't respond to big lures. I think they got caught on big lures so often, they knew to avoid them. It's now been a number of years that they've been, and me and my boat partner, we had it to ourselves to start with. We caught so many huge pike in the tournaments on small baits, specifically targeting big pike though, that now everyone's kind of on it. And what we're actually realizing is it opens the window while everyone then sways towards the small stuff. There's then a window and a possibility of fishing big baits again. So I think, there will probably be a period of this scaling down, but never forget the opportunity of maybe a big jerk bait or a big crankbait still, or something like that in your armory, because I think there's little windows of opportunity across quite a wide range when it's like that. But trying to avoid a little bit of like what everyone's on. So a little trick at the moment, I think, is to downsize, but then that might change very quickly as well.
I agree. When it's about perch, it's often doing something different compared to the others, and being one step ahead when it comes to lures and methods, doing something different. That can often pay off if you're not afraid to try something different.
Yeah, absolutely. So to walk us through a little bit of summer fishing. Would you be a classical power fishing guy, hard baits, that type of stuff, or what works for you in a little bit more warm water?
As I said, I don't do much fishing in the beginning of the summer, at least. And when I go fishing for perch in the summer, it's normally paddle tails, or I fish with blade bite, chatterbaits, bladed jigs, or I fish with our spin tail, the drop bite.
Yep.
It can be a fantastic summer bait for perch, and all the way into autumn. That's normally the way I'm fishing. If I'm fishing, you can fish with crankbaits also, of course. They can respond very well to crankbaits in the summer, and more aggressive style of fishing, higher speed. I'm not afraid to fish fast in the summer, but as long as you don't forget the spin stops, the pauses.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to fish fast, but don't forget to pause, because that's when they will take the lure. Even if you're fishing in the summer, they like the pauses.
Yeah.
It can be a good way to trigger them to fish fast and aggressive with lures like crankbaits and also soft baits, of course. But always remember to put in pauses.
And is the When you're fishing those, so all of those baits you've listed, so good paddle tails, because I know you're a fan of the bull tees in 9.5, chatterbaits, drop bites, spin tails, etc., they're all high vibration baits. Is it to stand? Is there a lot of bait fish, a lot of food around, so you're trying to find a lure that stands out? Or do you think it's just extra vibrations is kind of attracting them to the lure?
In the beginning of the summer, there's not so much small fish for them to eat. The spawning period is just over, and they haven't hatched yet and come out to deeper water. So if they have hatched, they are still in the shallows, and they're very small. So I don't think it's an important food item for the perch in the beginning of the summer. The small, just freshly hatched minnows.
Yeah.
So they of course can eat the 2-year-old, the older small fish. But I think the thing is to trigger them with vibrations and speed. And also when I'm fishing with soft baits, I normally tend to use heavier jig heads to get speed and to get more sound when hitting bottom and things like that. So even if it would be enough with a 7-gram jig head in a certain depth, I would maybe fish a 12.5 or a 15-gram. Just to get speed when it's sinking and to get more sound when it's hitting the bottom and so on.
And really cause a disturbance, like really try and activate them.
I would say that the best fishing comes in late summer when the freshly the fish from this year's spawning has grown a little bit, and they come out into deeper water in huge amounts, enormous schools of these freshly hatched small fish, and that makes both the perch and the zander, and I suppose the pike also go crazy. So in late summer and autumn, that's the period when they really feed hard and focus on these enormous schools of small fish that has hatched in the spring.
Because and those fish, so they would be, say most of those fish get born in the spring, and then you're fishing for them in the autumn, so it might be 6 months later or something. They're off the egg sac, and they're what, 1 to 2 inches? Would you then try and pick a bait that sort of matches that size? Because I think they do. They get very tuned in. Like you said, huge schools of very small fish. What sort of approach would you have at that time of year?
I would keep using lures that sends out a lot of vibrations. I still think bladed jig, chatterbait can be good. And as I said before, the spin tail, the drop bite can be fantastic. I love fishing with Stanley the stickleback. It's not so big, it's 7.5 centimeter. It's a lure that I will use all year round. Works fine in the summer. But also, I think crankbaits and jerkbaits can work fine in late summer and early autumn also. And I have had good fishing also in with bigger size than the small fishes. There can be periods when they are really preoccupied with these small ones. I see it very clearly on the zander. There is a period when they can be tricky to catch because they are only focused to eat these small fish. But to be honest, I have not had a super success with the zander by using small lures in this period. I catch as many zander on the bigger size lures as I do on the small lures.
What would be the biggest size that you would go up to then? So if there's lots of clouds of small fish, but you want to stand out, would you go up to like a bull tease 12.5, or I've seen Daniel fishing in Sweden before with a 14 centimeter shad tease slim. I barely fish for pike with a 14. Like I said, I use a 10 for pike a lot of the time. But how big would you go?
12 centimeter shad tease slim.
Okay.
Is a good lure in late summer and early autumn, especially early autumn, I think. So I'm not afraid to. I won't go up. You can get bites on even bigger ones, but the problem when you go too big is that you can't hook them.
Yeah.
You miss too many bites. So I don't see any. Then you have to put stinger hooks and stuff, and I don't like using stinger hooks when I'm fishing for perch. So I go to 12 centimeter shad tease slim. That's the limit for me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good.
I mean, you have the jerk bite, 11 centimeter, and I have friends who said good fishing with the 13 centimeter jerk bite. So it's different with the hard bait because you have the treble hooks and they're not afraid to attack them, not at all.
Yeah.
And with a hard bait you can hook them easier. So I think it's better to go up on a hard bait than on a soft bait.
It is surprising how aggressive perch can be. They can be very, very tricky sometimes, especially if the fishing pressure's high. And then every now and again, you're pike fishing with a 16 centimeter shad tease or a 15 centimeter swim or something like that. And a big one just comes out of nowhere and just wants to, knock the colors off it. It's crazy how aggressive.
Crazy. They can be so different from impossible to catch to attacking lures that are way too big. I remember the first year when we started to fish for perch in Holland. It was not uncommon that they got these huge perch on pike lures down there, like 19 centimeter platypus.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard of perch caught on 27 centimeter shad tease and
no, really?
Yeah, but sometimes I think they attack the hooks. Instead of the lure, they see the hooks moving and flashing in the water. So I think they attack the hook sometimes.
Yeah, they sure can be greedy. I remember you saying to me once that you very rarely catch a big zander by accident, but you can catch big perch and big pike by accident.
Yeah, that's to catch a big zander. There are so many small factors that you need to do right. That it's a very unusual fish to catch by accident. But big perch and big pike, especially big pike, if they are feeding, you can catch them on anything almost. If you are not thinking about hard pressured waters and so on.
Yeah. They've got that natural aggressive response pike, haven't they? Okay, so we're nearly round. We've nearly done full circle of the year. So we're coming through into autumn and then it starts getting cold again. So you've talked a little bit about some of your power baits, some of your chatter baits and stuff like that. And now when it starts to get cold, you start to get those first frosts of the year. I think this is where a lot of perch anglers start thinking about it because they're going to start feeding, packing weight on, looking amazing in their winter colours. Talk me through the type of venue. So would you be archipelago fishing or have you got a number of different venues that you might start going to? And what are you looking for? Weed beds, gravel beds, mussel beds, different food sources? Talk us through it.
In the archipelago, the perch are still quite a long way out in the archipelago, closer to the open sea. And when it starts to get colder, they also start moving into the archipelago further in. But in the beginning of the autumn, they are still way out in the archipelago, and you often find them around isolated small islands and things like that. And there is a lot of weed and stuff growing in that period, and you often find them around the weed and In the archipelago, in that time, I think they hunt a lot of small fish like gobies and roach and rudd and eyed, stuff like that. But once again, I think they are quite opportunistic. They won't let anything pass. And in the archipelago, it takes something to trigger them to bite. It's often jerk baits, aggressively fished, but maybe most of all chatterbait, because you can easier fish that among the weed. So chatterbait is normally the top lure in the archipelago in the beginning of the autumn. And when it's slowly getting colder, they go further and further into the archipelago to shallow water, but they still live shallow in the summer also, but they go further in. And when I would say when the water temperature gets below 15 degrees, the bladed jig, the chatterbait, is getting less efficient.
Right, guys, we should still be filming. We seem to have lost Jörgen for a second. Just lost you there for a second. So we're still recording. So if you just rewind slightly and you said around 15 degrees, the chatterbaits are less effective.
I would say that around 15 degrees in the water, I think the chatterbait, the bladed jigs, get less efficient, and it's more and more jerk baits and of course crankbaits. And I like crankbaits that are suspending, just like the jerk baits. So you can fish them in different speeds, to try different speeds, and then of course pause them so they keep hanging in the water. That's when the perch will take them. But also paddle tails are good in the autumn when it's not too cold. They like that too. And the colder it gets, the further in you will find the fish in the archipelago, and it will be more and more slow fishing and creature baits and Ned worms and stuff like that. When fishing in the cold water, fishing jig heads with offset hooks, because there is still a lot of weed in the autumn. But they are very active, the perch, I would say. You can have good fishing on crankbaits and jerkbaits and stuff like that.
I firsthand enjoyed probably some of the best jerkbait fishing stood next to you. That was such an incredible. It's on. If anyone hasn't seen it, go and check it out. It's over on the main Westin YouTube channel. When was that, Jörgen? Maybe 3 years ago. It's when the jerkbait first came out. It might be 4 years ago now.
I can check my phone if you.
And it was just, we went out. It was my first time on the archipelago, and I was sort of asking questions, what baits do you think we're going to use? Where do we target, etc., etc. And we went to some old weed beds that were starting to die down. Like Jörgen said, you get little bits still on the bottom that survive. The water was about 2.5, 3 degrees from memory. And we started off and we fished maybe, 4 or 5 hours. You had one quite quickly that was a nice one, about 45 centimeters. Then a couple of hours went by. We were fishing soft baits, hyper tees, 9 centimeters, bull tees, 9.5. And it was fairly slow fishing, wasn't it? And then we made a switch over to the jerk baits, and it was just like a different venue. My God, incredible fishing.
You were right, 2022 it was.
Was it? Yeah, there you go. So coming up to 4 years ago. It was one of those things which was, I love a suspending hard bait, but I've got to be honest, in 2.5 degree water, I wasn't really holding my breath. But the jerk baits, we tried crankbaits as well, but they just didn't seem to want a crankbait. But small twitches on a jerk bait just walking it around, and it's that suspending nature. I remember you saying to me a phrase I've never forgotten, Jörgen. You said, "Park it." You know, don't be afraid to just less is more. Like we were talking about with the Ned worms earlier. It doesn't have to do much. A small twitch, a small movement, and then just leave it in a number of seconds. And then sometimes you just go to twitch again and there's one on. And I'm sure he's just eaten it and he's just sat there. He's so cold. He's just sat there with its mouth, and the next twitch, and you've got one on. And we had them up to 51 centimetres, but so many 40 to 48 centimetre fish. It was some of the best fishing I've ever experienced in cold water.
Yeah, that's one of the fun parts with the fishing in the archipelago. For some reason, these perch are more active when it's cold in the water than the perch in still water in the normal lake. I would say that catching perch in a lake when the water is like that cold is not easy. But for some reason, I've seen it so many times. The water is super cold, but you can still catch perch if you adapt and find the right technique and the right lures. Even if the water is, like you say, 2 degrees, 1 degrees, even below zero, we have caught fish. They are special, these fish. I have the feeling they are more active in the cold water than the perch living in lakes, for example.
And so we're moving on through, so we've kind of done a bit of a full circle: warm water, power bait fishing, creature baits, Ned baits, that type of stuff, full circle back into cold water. Just tell me a little bit about, because I've got to pick you up on your PB. So on the post I put up recently asking for...
We can continue a little bit more, because when we are into the autumn and the water is getting cold, it's when it's getting really cold, it's of course always a good time to try the Ned worms and the creature baits also. So you should absolutely not forget if I should choose one lure for the cold water late autumn fishing, it would be a Ned worm.
And what size?
That's for sure. I would start with a 9 or a 7 centimeter, and if they are picky, I would go down to the new Ned worm slim 5.5 centimeter. But the smaller models, the 7 and the 9, has been working good in the archipelago for many years. So I haven't done any fishing there this year. I hope to go next week, so I don't know what's going on there. I know the fishing pressure has been affecting the fishing very hard there also. So the fishing is difficult. It's more difficult than before. So it might be that we have to scale down again and go to the Ned worm slim, the small one. But I have some new lures that I'm gonna try also in the archipelago that might be interesting for the perch, and I have high hopes on these new lures I'm gonna try out.
Something new and something different?
Yeah, a little bit different that they haven't seen that I'm working on. It will come out in the Westin program in the spring, I think. So I've been fishing with these lures now for a little while, and I still haven't tried them. I tried one of them in the archipelago. I had the first samples last winter, and that was a success. But I haven't tried them since. I'm very, very excited to try them on this coming trip.
Well, that's part of the joys of working at Westin, you know, some of the bait developments that we get to go through. And I think this resonates with a lot of people. There's a lot of people, we're all wanting to make improvements, find an edge. We sit in our garages, we maybe think, oh, this coloured cheb might make it stand out. What happens if I chop the tail off this and put a curl tail on it? And I think as lure anglers, we're always messing about with stuff, and we get to do it on a commercial scale a lot of the time, which is fantastic. So, okay, well I think that brings us to the end. Oh, what are you playing with there?
Talking about playing around, I know that you have seen the development in the bass fishing in the last years with all these dice baits with the with the skirt material, and I have played around with the Ned worms also with the skirt materials. And that's one type of lure I've had a good fishing on the last years in the winter time in cold water. Just pulling some skirt material through a Ned worm.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah, yeah. Again, just something a little bit different.
Yeah, to show them something different. So that's why I think perch fishing is so fun, because there are so many small things you can play around with, and especially in the winter time when they are tricky, it's such a big satisfaction when you have found an area with fish. You're fishing and you can't catch them, you know there is fish, but then you start experimenting with lures and colors and speed and whatever it is, and suddenly you start catching. It's such a kick and it's such a satisfaction when you find the right way to catch these difficult perch in the cold water. I think that is my favorite fishing. It can be fun to come out and catch a perch every cast for a few hours, but you get bored quite fast. It's much more the satisfaction is much bigger when you have this difficult fishing and you start experimenting, and you're maybe two guys in the boat and you help each other, you try different things, and suddenly you find the right lure or the right color or the right presentation, and you start catching fish. You might only catch 5 fish or 10 fish, but it's such a satisfaction when you have cracked the code, as they always say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's those days as well that are tricky. We've been out filming. We've got our new UK and Ireland YouTube channel, and we've had days filming where you only get one bite or two bites, and you end up with one nice fish. Surprisingly, they end up as quite popular videos, because I think if you're just honest with people and you just say, we've had a tough day, we've tried it, we've persevered, and then eventually you end up catching one or two fish. That's what a lot of people's fishing. They don't get to fish during the week. They might get one or two sessions at the weekend. It's not always easy. Conditions are challenging. And I think, if you persevere, those one or two bites can be more rewarding than just going and catching one a cast and it just being super easy,
Exactly, I agree. It can be fun every now and then to have a crazy fishing because you don't have it so often. But the satisfaction you get when the fishing is tough and you manage to catch one or two or three fish, it's something special. And that's I would say that is the typical winter fishing. When you go into the winter fishing and the water is really cold, the perch activity is extremely low, but you can still catch a few fish if you are patient and you keep trying and don't give up. You normally will catch a few fish, and the satisfaction you get from that is way bigger than anything else, I feel.
Okay, Jörgen, so we're in the autumn time, and a lot of our guys here will be fishing regular venues that probably are maybe a little bit different to the archipelago. So talk us through maybe like a bit of lake fishing. You do quite a bit of freshwater lake fishing as well.
Yeah, the lake fishing is, to be honest, completely different to the fishing in the archipelago. While the fish in the archipelago, they slowly go shallower and shallower and further in when it's getting colder. The perch in the lakes, they normally go opposite. They go deeper and deeper when the water gets colder. And I wish I had some really good lakes where I live, but I don't have if you're talking about big fish. I have some lakes where I can catch good fish, no monsters, but good sized fish. But I sometimes travel a bit further north in Sweden to fish lakes that have bigger fish, and it's completely different to the archipelago fishing. There are some similarities. If you look in the beginning of the autumn, it takes time for the water in the lakes to cool down, especially in the big deep lakes, and you can have good fishing on vibration baits like Ricky the Roach vibration bait, drop bite. Spintail is a fantastic bait in early autumn. Once again, crankbaits can be good. The problem might be when it's getting a little bit colder in the autumn, you can't get them deep enough. And then it's normally paddle tails, I would say. And it can be big paddle tails, 10, 12, 14 centimeters. They will attack if they're feeding. We have some cool things in some lakes in Sweden where there is a huge amount of bait fish. You can have these diving seagulls. The perch are hunting in these huge schools of bait fish, and they push them to the surface when they're hunting, and then the seagulls start diving to get their share of the cake. So sometimes when you're out fishing, you can see in the distance, you can see a group of seagulls diving, and then it's full speed with the boat to get there before it's over, because sometimes it's over in seconds, and sometimes you can fish there for a while. But even if the seagulls stop diving, the perch will still be somewhere in the area, so you can normally find them. So that is a very cool fishing you can have in the beginning of the autumn when it's still not too cold in the water. You can find them on stone structures in the lakes, still in the early autumn, in fairly shallow water, 2, 3, 4, 5 meters. But as it gets colder and colder, they will move slowly out on deeper water, and you will normally find them on drop-offs. I remember I fished a lake in Denmark a few years ago. I think the first session we did in that lake, we found them in 7, 8 meters. And the next one, we found them in like 8, 10 meters. And the next one in 10 to 12 meters. And the next one, they were too deep to fish for because they would not survive it. So you could really follow them, how they slowly moved out in these deep drop-offs. The ideal situation is if you have a lake that is not too deep. I fished a lake this autumn that is maybe between 5 and 6.5 meter, most of the area in the lake. And that is a great depth for fishing them in the autumn. And the first trips, we caught a lot of fish on the spintail jig, the drop bite, and the vibration bait, Ricky the Roach vibration bait, and of course, paddle tails like Chattees 9 or Chattees 10 or great baits. But the last time I was fishing there, the water was really cold. I could catch a lot of fish on paddle tails, but mostly small fish. And there was huge numbers of. It doesn't matter where you stopped in this lake, you could catch small perch. The problem was to find the big perch. And there is so much small fish. It can be for 1 kilometer you can see small fish on your fish finder. So the problem was to locate the bigger fish, and I found out that the drop bite, the spintail, was a good way to find the bigger size fish. And I used the biggest one in the sink model that is that hasn't got so high density. We have a tungsten one, but it's quite small. And if I use the tungsten one, I would have a perch like this every cast. So I tried to step up the lure size. So I used the biggest one we have in the plastic and sink. It's 22. Yeah, 22 gram, and then I got away a little bit from the smaller ones, and most of all I caught better sized fish. So I used this one to locate the areas where I had a little bit higher average perch, and I didn't fish it. I fished it as slowly as I could, but it's still way faster than fishing nedworms and stuff like that. But when I located areas with a little bit higher average, I started fishing with a Carolina rig. and dragging a creek crawl with a Carolina rig, and I got some nice fish. And then I started fishing our new slide up rubber jig with the biggest creek crawl, 8.5 centimeter creek crawl. I started dragging this tungsten slide up rubber jig along the bottom. I just took a few turns with the handle of the reel so it lifted off the bottom slowly, and then let it pause on the bottom, and then drag it slowly on the bottom with pauses, and the big perch just nailed it. So when I started fishing with this, I suddenly got into the bigger fish. And that was a real eye-opener. I hadn't fished with this style of lures before, so that was a real eye-opener.
That's
So
quite the
creek
mouthful
crawl,
as well then, because that's what, the 14-gram version with an 8.5 trailer on the back, 8.5 centimeter creek crawl.
yeah, I could see when I fished the creek crawl on the Carolina rig that I got the higher average of the perch, but I wanted a lure with even bigger profile, so that's why I rigged it on these, and that was the game changer of the day, because suddenly I started to catch the bigger fish on this. So we fished 3 days, and each day we caught a few big ones on this. My friend didn't have this. I offered him several times to borrow one, but he is as stubborn as I am. So he said he's going to try to see if he can find something else. I think he caught one fish over a kilo, and I had 12.
Oh, wow. So that's a big difference then in terms of bait selection. I like that whole process that you've gone through though, using different baits to crack the code. Because I think when people talk about cracking the code, you know, it's kind of a little bit more one-dimensional. It's a little bit more kind of like, oh, I found a particular bait, or I found a particular depth of water, or whatever it might be. And actually in that scenario, you're using multiple different baits to kind of almost step your way from, you know, 20 or 25 centimeter fish up to a slightly bigger average that lets you then, you know, because you can't fish those baits quickly, so you can't cover enough water. So you need a searching bait, and then you need a slow down to catch the big ones bait.
Yeah, so the key, to be honest, the key was the drop bite, because I could fish it quite fast to search. I couldn't fish the small ones in tungsten because I got a small perch in every bloody cast. They would take the small ones, but with the big ones, I could get away from some of the smaller ones, and apparently the big one, it seemed to attract the bigger perch also. I had one or two really big perch on this, but the breakthrough was when I found an area with the bigger size fish, and I started to fish with the slide up rubber jig and the creek crawl together, and dragging it slowly. They wanted it slowly on the bottom, the really big perch. They didn't want to chase a lure up in the water. I fished this as slowly as I could, just so I felt the blade started rotating, and pausing, letting it sink to the bottom, and fishing it as slowly as I could. And I definitely noticed that the average weight of the average size of the perch was higher on that one. But I couldn't catch the really big ones until I started using the creek crawl with the slide up rubber jig. So that was a real eye opener for me also.
Yeah, it's fantastic. What's funny is when you've got a particular bait on, it's almost as if those big ones aren't there, those kilo or kilo and a half fish, you know, what we would call 2 to 3 pounders. It's almost like they're not there. And you're just thinking, oh, there's just tons of... And then suddenly you find something and it gives you a breakthrough.
You can think that they're not there and move to another place, but this was a real eye opener, because they were there, but they didn't take the lures when you fished them up in the water. They wanted it on the bottom, and they wanted it super slow. Period. And they took it really aggressive. the bites when you pull this creek crawl along the bottom slowly with pauses, and they really nailed it.
And with
So
the tungsten as well, were you getting a lot of feedback? What ground were you on? Was it hard bottom like gravel and mussels, or?
It's definitely important when you're fishing this lure, and also like the Carolina, that you're fishing on structures, mussel beds. In this case, we found an area with mussel bed, and also some harder structure on the bottom, so you could really feel it, that you were on a harder bottom when you pulled the lure.
And does that gives you a bit more confidence to also stay in that area? You're thinking this is the right type of ground that the big ones are going to be feeding on. What do you think it is about that type of ground that they like? Is it little critters and food sources in and amongst the mussels and the rocks, or maybe they don't like silt, the soft bottom?
But one interesting thing with many of these perch I caught that days, you could see they had these damages on the forehead. You can see they have been digging in the stones and stuff, and I think they have been picking crayfish. So I think that's a way some of the perch in this lake hunts. They are eating crayfish in the rocks, and you could see it on them. I think I sent you some pictures where you can see this damage they have on the foreheads, because they really go hard on the crayfish. I don't know if it's possible for you to show some of the pictures.
Yeah. Let me bring them up. Go on, you carry on talking for a sec, and I'll bring them up.
You can see this pattern in many waters where you have crayfish eaters. They are bruised up in the forehead, and they really go hard for the food in among the rocks and hunting there. So you can see it very clearly on the fish. It's really cool when you can see that.
I'm just going to share my screen now, because I've got one of those. So this picture here, just sharing my screen, you can see all around the top of the head. God, it looks like it's all kind of scars and it's all beaten up. The rest of the fish looks immaculate, so it's not an old fish as such, but he's definitely got damage around the face. You think that's from digging into, get the crayfish out of the rocks and stuff? They're willing to take a bit of damage.
I think so, but they might get this from eating other things among the rocks also, because I have seen it in waters where you have no crayfish, but it's quite common to see it in waters where you have a lot of crayfish. You often get perch that looks like this.
Brilliant. I love that. It gives you another insight into, what's going on, and more importantly, how to target them. So that's fantastic. Right then, guys, we've come to the end of section 1, where we've gone round the seasons, and we're now going to move on to section 2. All right, guys, well, welcome back to the world's longest perch-specific podcast. We've had a little break. We've had a cup of tea. Very English tea. Jörgen's probably had a coffee, I imagine. And we're back into it. And this section, we're going to roll through the Q&A. We've got some really, really cool questions here. So we're going to dig straight in. So first of all, which one am I going to go for? I'm going to go for this one. I like this question. So it's from a guy called Patrick Flynn. And he's asked about braid selection. What is the right braid to use when I'm using 10 to 20 plus gram lures? He's on rivers. He's gone to fine braids down to sort of 6 pound or so, but rivers tend to be quite snaggy and he's losing a lot of lures. But he wants to try and find that balance for 10 to 20 gram lures on a river where he's obviously got the strength to not lose too much kit, but he wants that sensitivity for those big perch. So where would you go? Talk us through braid selection.
When we got braid in our program a couple of years ago. It was quite exciting, and of course, you started to try the different braids. I have ended up with using W10 braid, the orchid purple, and I started when I decided to more or less only use that braid. I started for zander with 0.145 millimeter. And for PERCH, I used most of the time 0.125 millimeter. But I soon figured out that this bloody braid was so strong that I had no reason I could go down in diameter. So for my perch fishing nowadays, I use for the all-round fishing, I will use 0.10 millimeter. And I need to step down to have a little bit more finesse. I go 0.08 millimeter.
Yeah. So, and
For the sand,
in just quickly, in breakage terms or kilos or pounds, where's that at? Because some people do diameter and some people purchase their braid on breaking strain. So I think I use the 0.08 mil a lot, which I think is 13 pound in the W10.
I have to check because I'm not. The 0.08 is 13 pounds.
Yeah.
And the 0.128 millimeter is 16 pounds.
16, that's right, yeah.
If you're fishing rivers with that heavy lures, and up to, what did you say, 20 grams?
Yeah,
it's quite heavy.
10 to 22 grams, I think, mostly.
I think he need to step up the strength and the diameter, because the diameter is what is important when it comes to what do you say in English?
The presentation?
Yeah, but also the resistance against snags and stuff.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It doesn't help to have a super strong braid if it's very thin, because it will be very sensitive to abrasion against rocks and stuff. So I would use a thicker line. Then you have a more resistance against. It will be more abrasive resistance against rocks and stuff if you have a thicker. It doesn't help with even if you have a super strong braid. If it's thin, it's also more sensitive to
even the most tiniest little nick, or
it will cut the line. And also, if you go down to, I mean, the W10 braid is 13 strand.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go down to a braid with less strands, it will also be more abrasive resistant.
Yeah.
So I would if I have water with a lot of snags, I would think about going down to the W3 braid, because it's very abrasive resistant.
Yeah. So for a bit of context for people at home, we do kind of three different categories, I suppose, of braid. The cheapest one is W3, then we've got a W6, and then we go up to W10. And the W3 is a more basic braid. It's still an 8-strand braid, but it's more of a, I kind of describe it a little bit more of a workhorse. So just like Jörgen said, it's in those, when you need a tougher braid, if you've got snags or anything that it might be roughing up against, then the W3 could actually be your first choice. You know, it's not always the most expensive braid is the best.
If you compare the 0.08 millimeter W10, as we said, it has 13 pound breaking strength. If you compare it to a W3, 0.08 is only have 7 pound breaking strength.
So about half.
It's not the breaking strength that is interesting in this case. It's the thickness, the abrasive resistance,
Yes.
how much shit it can take, and then I would step down to an 8 braid, or even further if he is not happy, to a braid with less
Fibers,
uh,
yeah, yeah.
strands, because it will be more abrasive resistant. So instead of thinking in breaking strength, you should think in thickness.
Okay, that's really interesting. Well, I'm going to jump in here because when we brought our braids out, I did a lot of research about this because I knew I was going to get a lot of questions about it, and I wanted to not. There's a lot of mystery that surrounds braid. People talk about, oh, there's a bad batch here, and do you buy on breaking strain or diameter, and what's a pick rate, and what's PE, and all of this sort of stuff. So I did tons of research, and I've got a few interesting sort of like fun facts, I suppose, for the listeners here. So the first one I learnt was that about colour. So we've taken a little bit of flack, I would say, for our colours rubbing off, and they're not fully colour fast. And the reason that is, and I want to explain this to people because there is a reason behind it. When you're designing a braid, you make it out of a product called PE, which is polyethylene. So it's technically it's a type of plastic. And you can either colour it two different ways. The first way, you can put the colour into the liquid PE, the polyethylene, and then when it comes out, that's a colour fast braid because the colour is in the actual strands. What that does though, the chemicals make it a weaker braid. So the other way to do it is that you make your braid, which is in the normal sort of translucent colour, and then you have to put them in dye vats afterwards. Now the dye only kind of sticks to the outside. There are a couple of different ways that we try and make it as colour fast as possible, but it will fade a little bit over time. But it is a stronger, like for like, it's stronger than a colour fast braid. And so that's a point that's come up that I think a lot of people don't understand. So you've got to pick your poison. You either want a less strong braid that holds its colour, or you can have a stronger braid that might lose a bit of colour. But that is the trade-off. And then when it comes down to another one which I found really interesting is what's called the pick rate. And as far as I know, we were one of the first brands to launch on the packaging the actual pick rate. And the pick rate is essentially weaves per inch. So when you've got an 8-strand braid or a 13-strand braid, it's how many weaves are put in and how tight it is. Now, our product developer said to me, if you had a 4 or an 8-strand braid that had a pick rate of 20 weaves per inch or less, you would effectively be able to push it and it would like open up. And when that happens, you can have water ingress, you can get dirt and debris that literally goes in, and it literally it sort of almost swells in the water. And if you've got a higher pick rate, a higher weave rate, it creates a much tighter, a much rounder braid that's much more direct. It's less likely to take on water. It's better at casting distances, and it's less likely to have debris or for any of the individual strands to actually get caught on anything to snag as well. So there's a couple of points I just wanted to put in there because not a lot of people know the technicalities of braid, and that was two things that I found really interesting. So
Yeah.
it's and again in our range we've got. Do you use the W10? So we've got the orchid purple, which has got one coating, and then we do the jigging braid as well, which is in pickled pink. Do you ever use that one? It's a little bit stiffer because it's got two of the coatings on.
I have more or less only, nowadays, I more or less only use the W10 or orchid purple. I have used the pickled pink, and I have used the morning mist.
The blue one, yeah.
But Yeah, the light blue one, but I prefer the orchid purple. And it's always the thing with lines. When you have found the line that you like, it's nothing you change. I'm very sensitive to that. If you get a line sometimes and you have problems with it, you never go back to that line again.
I know. Yeah.
So once you have found a line that you have confidence in and you like, then you stick with that line because it's so sensitive just trying different lines. So I always prefer to find a line that I have full confidence in, and then I stick with that line. And if we go back to that question, of course, there is another thing, not only the braid, it's also the leader he's using. Is he using a fluorocarbon leader?
Yeah.
Because that is also help the protection of the braid. If he can go up to maybe a longer fluorocarbon leader to protect the braid against the abrasion on rocks and stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. And even when it comes down to the fluorocarbon, we do two different types of fluorocarbon. ST3, which is a harder material, so it's a little bit harder and a little bit stiffer. And we do an ST5, which is a little bit more soft and supple. And again, you can pick your lines depending on what scenarios you've got. I always like for my Carolina fishing, because you've got that leader length, I actually like the ST3. It's a little bit more stiffer and it's a little bit more direct. I always think Carolina, they've got a lot of time to pick the bait up and move around without putting an indication on the end of my rod. And so, you know, and it's better if you've maybe got pike. If you're going to likely hook a pike, it's a little bit harder and more abrasion resistant. But then maybe at the other end with something like a drop shot or other methods where you want softer and supple lines, then you maybe pick the ST5 in that scenario. So
I think I don't know if I'm saying too much now, but I know we will also get an even stiffer fluorocarbon in the future.
yes, yeah,
That will help you even more. So different stiffness of the fluorocarbon and abrasion resistance. So it's not only the braid he should think about. You should also think about the leader, the fluorocarbon, how thick and how long.
yeah, yeah,
Because you don't want to have your braid on the rocks, because they are super sensitive to that kind of abrasion. They are, when they're fresh and fine, they are so strong you can pull a car with them, but they cannot stand much abrasion against rocks and stuff. So that's the most important thing to think about, to get the braid away from the rocks. And don't be afraid to step up the diameter of the braid. Think diameter instead of strength.
yeah, yeah, good thinking. Winter fishing. We probably touched on this a little bit in section 1, but winter fishing, what is your best or favorite rig? And then the same person asked, is there any difference in finding perch in the winter than the rest of the year? So we could actually talk maybe a little bit about sonars. Let's assume we're on a boat. If we're in the winter, what are you looking for in terms of either bottom structure or areas? And maybe what are you looking for on your side scan or your live as well?
Once again, it's a big difference between a lake and archipelago fishing. So I think we dropped the archipelago fishing because most people are not fishing in the archipelago. In the rivers, if I'm fishing a river, I would definitely look for backwaters, areas where there's less current. The colder the water is, the less the perch want to stay in the current. They want to get away from the current. So always look for deeper holes, areas that are protected from the current, backwaters, slack waters where the current slows down. It makes it easier to find a perch in flowing water in rivers, because you know they will be in this type of spots.
Yeah.
If you're looking in lakes, I would normally I would not do so much winter fishing in lakes because it can be difficult, and it's normally frozen here in Sweden. But as I said before, they will go out deeper and deeper the colder it gets. And for example, if you have an area with a shallow area with rocks and stuff, an underwater island, you will normally find them outside of the structure, where it goes from the structure to flat bottom. You can also find them on flat bottoms on plateaus in the winter. They don't need to stand on structure, but normally they are close to some kind of structure, close to a drop off, close to some rock piles, something that is breaking off the environment. The rock pile, some old tree laying in the water. Harbors, they like to go into harbors because there's normally a lot of small fish there in the winter. Bridges, platforms going out in the water where they can hide. Anything that breaks off from the normal is interesting to look at. And in some really deep waters, they go too deep to fish for them. I've seen perch down in 14, 15, 16 meters, and I do not fish for them in that depth because they will suffer from the pressure.
Yeah, okay, so I think that's an interesting point to pick up on then. What would you class as a cut-off point in terms of depth? Because so pike, not so much, because they've got the ability to burp. So if you bring them up from a depth, then they can expel some of those gases. But perch and zander do suffer from barotrauma to the degree where, you bring them up from depth and it's a bit like a scuba diver that's holding his breath. He's got the chance of popping his lungs, and often sometimes, the swim bladder can even come out of the mouth from the air expanding. So where's your cutoff for safety on, you might see some great fish, but you're just not going to target them below a depth?
In my experience, there is some kind of when it comes to sander, I feel the sander are even more sensitive than the perch. And for me, 10 meter is definitely the deepest I will fish for a sander. And perch, I can't say I have a lot of experience with deep fishing for perch, but I have fished down to 10 to 12 meter and found it okay, but it seems to happen things around 12 meter.
Okay.
But it can be different because sometimes you get a sander on 7 meter and it has you can see it's affected by the change of depth and the pressure, and sometimes you can catch them in 10 meters and they are fine. So I think it can also be maybe this sander came from 14 meter and you catch it 5 minutes after it was on 7 meters.
Yes.
So you don't know what's happened before you caught the fish. Maybe it came from even deeper water and it hasn't really adjusted yet. And it's impossible to say exactly what depth will kill the fish or give problems. But I have 10 meters for sander, and I don't like to fish much deeper. 10, maybe not deeper than 12 meter for perch.
Yeah. That's good advice, I think.
I have seen in England that they quite often fish for sander in some of the reservoirs very deep, and I do not understand how they can do that without killing the fish.
Yeah, I don't know. It is a problem that we have, and I don't know if it's kind of a bit of an elephant in the room where people don't really want to discuss it a huge amount, or maybe it's wishful thinking. You put a zander back and it fights to go down a little bit, and then once it's done and it's gone, then it's not your problem anymore. Me and my boat partner Kev, particularly when we've got the zander competitions, we're often saying we don't fish. Sometimes they're in the spring as well, which tends to suit the shallower water. But a lot of the time we're only fishing maybe 5 or 6 meters deep at the maximum anyway, just because it suits our style and that's what we prefer. And you're in such a safe zone there in 5 or 6 meters. Whereas some of the other guys, they'll go 15 to 20 meters or more, and it's
I've been surprised many times when I read about zander fishing in UK that they're fishing so deep. Normally the English anglers are very protective about their fish, but so that's why I've been really shocked when I see how deep they fish for them.
Yeah, and do you know what's even more strange is if then someone holds up a picture of a zander with its eyes bulging out. That is, I mean, catching it just for the sake of catching it's one thing, but then to kind of hold it up and advertise it with its eyes coming out and experiencing barotrauma is just, a bit crazy to me. So, but anyway, let's stay on perch.
Back to the it depends a lot on how deep the water. If it's a really deep water, it's a risk that the perch are too deep to fish for. But if it's a shallower water, look for something that breaks off the normal rock piles structure. Closed, and of course bait fish. Small fish is like a magnet to the predators.
Yeah. And once you've identified that, you've found a rocky structure, a drop-off, a sunken tree, or whatever it is, let's say you're on a sonar. What are you looking for? Are you on 2D? If it's shallow enough, are you on side scan? Are you looking for groups? Like, what differentiates, because I think this is a big question for a lot of people. They think, is that a bream shoal I'm looking at? Is it big roach? Is it perch? Is it like, how do you actually try and pick out the perch on a sonar across any other fish?
The waters where I fish, you very rarely find the big perch in big schools. I find that bream, for example, they can be in quite big shoals, and they're often very tight together when you see them on the sonar. The big perch are normally in smaller groups, 3 to 7 fish or something like that, and a little bit more spread out.
Yeah.
My problem especially when fishing in the archipelago, is the tench. They behave and they look very much like the perch. So it's quite often I mistake a fish. I think it's perch, but it turns out that it's tench. We have learned through the years. So the perch and the tench, they look very similar on the side image, like small groups of fish, a little bit spread out and moving quite slowly.
Mm-hmm.
I normally, when looking for spots, the side image or side view is a very good tool to find small structures that would take so much longer time to find with just the 2D. So the side image is the secret to finding these small, and it can be only a few small rocks in an area with a lot of mud or something, can be like a magnet to the fish. So always look for small things, and side image is the best thing to use for that. And of course you can see it on the 2D sonar also. To be honest, I am not a live scope fisherman. I never fish for perch with a live scope and casting to them. I use the live scope in perspective mode when fishing in the archipelago and in some lakes, just to find an area with fish. And then we're just casting. We're not casting, it's not a sniper style fishing that you're casting to a specific fish or something. I don't think that is so fun. I prefer the old style fishing. Sometimes it can be necessary to use a live scope if you want to catch anything. I've seen that in Holland especially. It can be so tricky. Sometimes you're only fishing for one single fish standing alone. So live scope can be very, very efficient, but I prefer not to fish with live scope. And I haven't used the style that I cast to single fish for many years now. So I only use it to locate areas with fish. And then If it's a school of Eid, for example, that we have also in the archipelago, they are normally moving around a lot, and they are normally a lot of many fish in the school. And as I said before, the bream schools are very tight and often many fish also. But the Eid is moving around. You see them on the perspective move. There's just swimming around like crazy. So you learn after a while. You learn if it's a perch or a Eid or whatever it is you see. But perspective mode, if you have a live sonar in your boat, or a side view is the probably the best tool to find groups of fish and to find structures where you can hopefully find a fish also.
Well, it's interesting you say about LiveScope, Jörgen, because I had a session maybe like a month ago where we've got a venue here in the UK which the perch are like ghosts. Sometimes you can find them, and I've had days where you can catch 20 or more that are over the sort of the 1.5 kilo mark in a day. Fantastic fishing, including some sort of 2 kilo fish as well. And then you go back a couple of days later and you never find a shoal. You don't find the shoal, you don't find any fish, and you don't get a bite all day. It's absolutely crazy. They can come and go. But I went about a month ago and I was really struggling to find them, and I searched an area in a bay, and I had my side scan, I had my 2D, and I had my live on, and I had a good look around this bay, and there's normally a few fish in there, but the numbers of fish, I think it's one shoal that's actually gone down over the years. And I'd almost given up. I'd spent about half an hour sort of tracking and trying to search for them. I couldn't find anything. And I was actually on the way out of the bay, and they went under the boat. And there was about 3 or 4 fish maximum that went under the boat. So I slowed the boat down, put the spot lock on, and I flicked my rig back down the line that the boat's just come, thinking I can't be that far away. And I work it back, and I'm only a few meters away from the boat. I'm on a little creek or on a Texas rig, and I've got my live pointing directly down the line that I've cast. And occasionally when I flick it high enough, I can even see my bait on the live, so I know I'm in the right direction. And I got underneath the boat, and I had a bite, and I've caught a 46 centimeter perch, and I never saw it on the live. And then after I hooked that one, I cast out again, and I'm looking intently. I'm looking on my 360. I can't see anything on the electronics, even the live. And then I had another bite the next cast, and I missed it. But that was it. But I've caught one, and I'm getting another bite, and I'm looking at the live directly there, and I still can't see them sometimes. If you've got those little bits of rocky structure, they're absolute masters when they sit close to the bottom. It's very difficult to see them sometimes as well. So live is not the be all and end all. Sometimes you can get into an area and just do some classic casting, and then they come out of nowhere, you know. But it just...
I had a similar experience last week that you told me about now, but there was not live involved. I was out trying to, just for fun. It was a day with not so much wind. It was cold and terrible and grey like it is in December. But I went out with a friend just to get out on the water, and we were fishing for zander. And normally when I fish for zander in this lake, I'm casting for them, jigging for them. And they are on the drop-offs. But now when it's getting cold, they sneak out. They leave the drop-offs and sneak out in the deeper water and on the bottom. And if they're active, you will see them up in the water, pelagic, hunting. But this day, I just couldn't find a zander. The whole day, I saw one zander in midwater, pelagic. And then you think, then they should be on the bottom. If they're not up in the water, they're normally on the bottom. But I just couldn't see any zander. It was absolutely clean on the drop-offs where I normally catch the zander earlier in the year. when casting with soft lures. So I knew they were out on the deep flat bottoms. And through the whole day, I maybe saw 3 fish on the 2D that I think could be a zander. So I think when the zander go down and stand on this, especially if it's soft bottom, they just disappear. You don't see them on the 2D. It's a little bit easier to see them on the live scope because it's enough they move a little bit. You can see them flickering or something on the screen. But on the 2D, you just don't see them. And then I found an area with a little bit more small fish. I could see there were a little bit more activity in this area. So I thought, what the hell, let's try. And in 1.5 hours, we had 4 big zander in this area, where I hadn't seen a single big fish on the 2D. They were there, and when we got them in the boat, they were full with leeches and stuff. So they were standing on the bottom in the soft
in the mud
on the bottom. You couldn't see them on the fish finder. I saw a lot of small fish in this area. That's why I tried there, just by a chance, and we got 4 nice zanders and missed a few bites.
It just goes to show, because I think there is a lot of hate against well, definitely there's a lot of hate against live scope, but in general there can often be some hate just against technology. You know, oh, isn't fishing about relaxing and this, that and the other? I think for most people nowadays, we're open to using some technology, but it just goes to show it's not the be all and end all of everything. You know, sometimes you've just got to, like you've done, you've read the conditions, you've seen a few bait fish, and then suddenly you manage to catch. That's much more watercraft than it is, you know, using the sonars and the technology and just classic fishing. Just let the rod tell you what's going on rather than the sonars.
Yeah, and it's such a the satisfaction when you catch fish like this is enormous. When we went to the shore that day, we were super happy. We had 5 zander in total, 1 mini zander and 4 big ones. We were super happy. It was a fantastic day with only 4 zander that was in a good size, but still it was great because it was difficult and we managed to catch 4 big fish. So to me, if I can catch them without live, it's so much more satisfaction.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can learn a lot from the live scope. That's for sure. You can learn a lot, and in some occasions I can live with it, and especially when the fishing is super hard, and it's the difference between catching 1 or 2 fish and catching nothing. Then I can convince myself that it's okay, but I'm not a super fan of live scope, but I definitely see the advantages with it in some occasions.
Yeah. Well, one other tip that I can give people as well is if you get yourself in an area that you think holds, you know, you're thinking to yourself, this bay normally holds some fish, but I can't really see any on the sonars. Depending on the depth, obviously, I love throwing a jerk bait or a crankbait over the top, not necessarily to catch them. They just lift off the bottom and you can see them. And it gives you that little bit of confidence. You think, you watch 2 or 3 marks come up, and sometimes they only get halfway to the jerkbait before they go back down. And then you think, I've spotted you. and then you can fish other methods, Carolinas, creature baits, rubber jigs, you know, that type of thing. And you're more likely to catch them on the deck where they are. But that's a little trick sometimes. Fish a mid-water bait and see if you can lift 1 or 2 off the deck. The beginning of that.
Can we take a break?
Yeah, we can take a break. Yeah, no problem.
Just gonna get another coffee.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so just to wrap up on that one as well, because the first part of that question was winter fishing. What's your best or favourite rig, if there's just one?
Ned or Carolina?
And how would your Ned be? Cheb?
I would try both, see what they respond best to.
Yeah.
Normal Ned jig head or a Cheb rig, and see what they like, if they like the Cheb or the other one, because I would probably start with the Cheb. I think that works better normally. But Carolina or Ned? Carolina with a creek crawl or some kind of worm style bait.
Excellent. And then,
It might also be because I think drop shot is boring. So it can, of course, it can also be efficient, but I would try Ned and Carolina as my first options.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one, Jörgen. I very rarely tie a drop shot up, but yeah, no, that's good. And then so just to recap, because I think we've gone off in quite a few different directions on that one.
As usual.
Yeah, which I love. I think that's the part of these podcasts. But when you're looking for perch, so structure, the ability to use sonars, but they're not the be all and end all of everything. Looking for bait fish. And then, but I think the structure thing is the main thing, but it's not always structure in terms of a tower or a marina or it's underwater structures as well, drop-offs, underwater logs and rock piles.
There'll be a few small rocks in some. It doesn't need to be big structures at all.
Yeah.
And they're not always on the structure. They can be close to the structure also.
Yeah, so have a good search around there. Right, we've got a question here from a chap called Matt Ward. So thanks, Matt, for the question. Tips on cranking for perch in the winter. The best cranks for slower presentations. And do you fish, he said here, open water versus deflecting off the bottom. So I'm assuming when he says open water, he's probably talking about mid-water versus digging into the bottom when it's cold. What's your tips on cold water cranking?
It's not the first method I would use if it's really cold, but it can be good when it's cold, not really cold, but cold. And I would definitely choose some kind of crankbait that is suspending, because in the cold water, the pauses when you park it is even more important. The colder it is, the longer you should let the lure hang. The longer you should park it, because that's when they will rise up and take it. And it can be efficient to have a lure that we talked about before that is digging in the bottom also to wake them up.
Yeah.
But I think I would prefer a crankbait that is fished a little bit above the bottom, and then fish it with pauses and park it. That's what I had the best result with. If I'm gonna give you an example, I would go for the buzz bite. I know that is one of your favorite lures also.
Yeah.
I think most of the time you're fishing the bigger models that's running deeper, but I'm using all models. I'm using the 4 centimeter one when I'm fishing in the archipelago because it runs very shallow. I'm using the 5 and the 6 and the 6.5. It all depends on how deep there is where I'm fishing. I even using the shallow runner with a small lip. In the archipelago, this can be deadly because it's so shallow fishing that fishing this lure above the weed can be deadly. It runs about 0.7, I would say, depending on.
So what's that, like 2 foot? Yeah, 70 centimeters. Yeah.
And in the archipelago, this can be deadly fished above the old dying weed where the perch often is standing. So I'm using all the sizes of buzz bite depending on the depth where I'm fishing. There is another lure that I like a lot, and that is the raw bite. It's an old lure in the Westin program. It has the buzz bite has a quite tight, hard movement, hard vibrations, and this one has a more wider action. And in the archipelago, this can sometimes be really, really good. But maybe a little bit more to the autumn time than winter time. But the bus bite can be excellent because I can park it and adjust. If the bigger models can be a little bit more difficult to get suspending, but adjusting the hooks, the split rings, or the leader you have, you can always make them suspending.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely top info. Some of it's just venue dependent. You know, sometimes digging a crankbait into the bottom is the best way to stir them up. But like Jörgen said, he's fishing areas where he might be fishing over the top of old weed beds. So it's just a non-starter in that scenario if you've got weed. You know, whenever I find a rocky bank that I think, or a mussel bank that I think the perch are sitting on, it can just be absolutely deadly sometimes touching into the bottom, because I think there's little bits of, there's little invertebrates, there's little shrimp and crustaceans and worms and bugs and stuff that live in them. But sometimes you often get a light coating of, even in very clear water, on top of mussel beds, you get a light coating of the sediment that sits there.
Yeah,
and I think running a crankbait through and almost physically stirring the bottom up can, you know, it's the noise of it tack, 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 tack into the bottom as well. And it just gets that curiosity. And it's the type of thing, here in the UK, we've got a lot of people that I say have soft plastic itis. They've got, all they use is soft baits. And I always just think a perch box or a good perch angler should be able to have all round skills: soft baits, hard baits, chatter baits, deep diving crankbaits, shallow diving crankbaits, jerk baits, spin tails, and you just got to know when to use them. That's the key for me. So, but yeah, that's great. I think the days in winter when you do catch on a crankbait as well, that's a good day as well. You tend to get very good bites on them.
Yeah, but it's not my first choice winter lure, that's for sure. But it can be efficient some days, absolutely.
Bit like that jerkbait day that we had. You know, some days for whatever reason, it can just be the day. I often say to people as well, my one rule for winter cranking is keep an eye on the weather, because if you get, and I've had this before catching multiple big perch, if you get a bit of a stormy, weathery, it warms up. So, you know, maybe you get a lot of frosts and a lot of cold weather where it's 4 or 5 degrees or less for like a week, and the water temperature's 3 or 3.5 degrees. And I've had it before where the air temperature comes up to 11 or 12 degrees and you get like a warm southwesterly wind. The water temperature only comes up 0.2 or 0.3 of a degree. Still really cold water, but because it's going on the up, that is always my suggestion of when to think about a hard bait as well. It just instigates a little bit of extra action out of them. So, excellent. Right, I've got zero experience in this next question, but I know that you have as well, and you've sent me some photos, so I'm going to put this up. And I desperately want to hear some tips on night fishing for perch. Talk us through it.
I'm not super experienced. I haven't done it hundreds of times. I cannot say that. But I have done it enough to know that it can be very efficient in some periods. The periods we have done proper night fishing, and I'm not talking about staying 1 hour extra in the evening when it's getting dark. I mean fishing through the night in the winter or early spring. Fishing all through the night in the pitch black night. It's not in a town where you have a lot of lights and stuff. It's in the proper wilderness when it's completely black.
Really?
And yeah. I know in Sweden there are some places they're fishing in towns. They can have excellent night fishing, but there is a lot of lights, also city lights.
Yeah.
We have done it in the archipelago, and we have done it in a river. And the reason why we tried it was most because of the fishing getting very, very difficult or almost impossible close to the spawning time.
Right.
We had several days in a row with maybe one perch in a whole day. Extremely difficult fishing, and we know there were loads of perch there. So we started to try fishing into the dark a few hours to start with, and we caught fish, and then we started to fish all nights. And we didn't catch many fish, but we caught big fish.
Oh, really?
And and the most exciting memory I have from this is a night when my friend Dayan, he caught a 3 kilo perch in the middle of the night.
Oh, wow.
It's many years in now. Was it 2016 maybe? I can check with my photos.
Wow. Because I've always thought that. I've done a little bit of street fishing. I've always thought perch are quite visual feeders. You know, you need clearer water. They're not brilliant in muddy water. And I've always thought if it got black, it takes out that sense of vision, and I wouldn't have expected it to be good. Like zander night fishing, yeah, for sure. Always expected that. But I do see, and I see this across a lot of Europe, a lot of the huge pike that get caught now are in darkness. And is it, what is it, a pressure thing?
Fishing pressure. I think that's fishing pressure. In the dark, the pike is more and more getting active in the dark because of the fishing pressure. So I think that's another thing. Of course, they are active in the night, but this perch fishing, we didn't. It wasn't because of the fishing pressure. We couldn't catch them in the daytime. I think it was something when it was starting to get close to the spawning time or something. So that's our thoughts at least. And as I said before, my friend Dayan, he caught a perch of 3,010 grams, 3 kilo and 10 grams. 9:30 in the evening in the pitch black. It was completely black. And
well, if you send us the photo, we'll put it up on the screen in the edit.
I think I have sent the photo, or haven't I? Did I send a picture of you?
Yeah, you might have done. Yeah, so we'll put it up on the screen in a second. So, what a fish, though. That's it. And how are you targeting them?
That was the biggest perch caught in Sweden for 32 years. There has been rumors about 3 kilo perch, but there hasn't really been any evidence. So except for the Swedish record perch, this was number 2, and the biggest perch for 32 years. Now I think it's even 40 years. The second biggest perch for 40 years, except for the Swedish record perch.
Wow, that's incredible. And how are you targeting them? Like soft baits or crankbaits or what?
Yeah, I can continue. We of course, after getting this fish, we did some more night fishing, and we caught some more really nice fish. No monsters like that one, but some good fish. And a few years later, we started to adapt to this fishing in the archipelago, because this first experience was in a river. And then we had the same situation in the archipelago. We just couldn't catch them in the daytime. So we started talking about it, and we started trying it, and we had really good results. And I actually caught my biggest Swedish perch when doing this. I caught 2.3 kilo perch in the middle of the night in the archipelago. So the experience is not, we haven't done it so many times, but the rewards has been quite interesting. We've had some really good sized fish. No, I think the best night maybe 8 fish or something like that. Normally not many fish, 3, 4, 5 fish, but normally very good size fish. So it's very interesting. I think there is a lot to learn about this, and I have still have a lot to learn about this night fishing. What we saw when we started doing this fishing was that they responded best to paddle tails.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose they don't see very much in the dark. So I was thinking there must be something that's sending out vibrations in the water. So paddle tails. Diane caught this huge perch, this 3 kilo fish on a 9 centimeter shad teeth. And I had good result with another paddle tail. And I used a black one, thinking maybe silhouettes and stuff. But I would say we've had best results with the darker colors. Not only black, but the darker colors. In the archipelago, we had best result with a bull teeth in the color UV craw.
Yeah.
Was the top lure in the archipelago when we were doing night fishing. So quite dark colors, but definitely paddle tails. I tried many times with crankbaits because you think they should be easier for the perch to detect. They send out even more vibrations and more sound than a soft lure. But what I can remember, we didn't catch a single perch on a hard bait.
Oh, interesting.
It might be different some other times. As I said, I haven't tried it enough to be any expert in some way, but we caught all the fish on soft lures, paddle tails.
And quick question then, Jörgen. I'm assuming you have to know the areas that you're fishing quite well, because if you're literally sat on a boat in the pitch black, you're just casting into the nothingness. You must be familiar with the areas already to know what you're feeling for, to know what the retrieve might be, because it must be quite a strange experience fishing for perch.
It's very strange
dark.
in the beginning, but quite fast you get into this fishing and your senses adapt to it. So after a while you get a very, what can I say, very special feeling about this casting into nothingness and trying to fish your lure properly and feel the bites and everything. The bites were not harder; they were good and bad, but like they were in the daytime, but still very interesting. And we fished in spots that we knew there were fish. From daytime experience, we know that these spots hold fish. So we didn't go around looking for them in the dark. We fished spots that we knew held fish, and what I can remember, we didn't change spots. We put the boat in one spot and then we stayed there all night in one single spot.
Ah, okay.
It might have been, maybe if we didn't catch anything, we might have changed the spot. But the times we have tried, we have caught a few fish. So what I can remember, we didn't move around. We stayed in one spot and fished all night.
And just another quick question then on water clarity in the darkness. I know the archipelago is generally fairly nice, clear water. What about the river fishing that were you in as well? Do you think it requires a water clarity, so they can, like you said, a darker lure with a little bit of a silhouette, they can see something? Or do you think it would work in very coloured water as well, where they're just going off the vibrations?
I cannot answer that question. The river we fished has very, very dark water that you have in some of Sweden, some parts of Sweden, very dark black brownish water. It's clear, but it's very dark water. I haven't tried it when it's been really murky water, to be honest. I feel that it's fishing that you should try a little bit more. I feel there is a lot to learn, but yeah, you need a friend that is crazy enough to stay with you in the boat for a whole night. Not always so easy to find them.
Very.
In March when it's 1 degree and pitch black.
It's exciting stuff. I love that. You know, the search for an edge, the thoughts that you've got going on around, oh, I wonder what it would be like this. We try at nighttime, we try different venues. The pursuit of trying to outsmart them, I just think is magical. That's so cool.
The funny thing that we thought that the night fishing would pick up after Dayan caught that huge fish, but it never really did. We never saw another somebody trying the same approach, fishing a whole night. There was people fishing into the dark for sure, but the fishing in the archipelago we have kept quiet. We haven't told anyone. This is the first time I'm telling about it because it was so interesting that we decided to keep it quiet. So this is the first time I tell it.
Oh, you heard it here first, folks. That's fantastic.
The problem is they have, since we did it, they have closed the fishing where we fished, so we cannot do it again. It's closed now, so that's a little bit frustrating because we felt that we were onto something really interesting.
Well, it is. It's fascinating. And maybe, you know, we've talked a little bit about Holland, and I know you've got good experience in Holland. That seems to be getting harder and harder as well. I wonder if, I know they do the pike fishing and zander fishing after dark, but perch fishing's not really heard of in the dark. Maybe that could be a key.
I have thought about it many times. You see if I can talk Crazy Toon into trying it. I know that Luke is not much for night fishing, but maybe Toon.
You've got to give it a go for sure. That would be incredible to work out if it's effective or not.
I've thought about it many times, but we'll see if I can get someone to try it with me down there.
Brilliant. Well, lots of great tips there on night fishing. Right, moving on to another. In fact, we were just kind of talking about it with pressure. How do you approach pressured waters where they've seen every lure under the sun?
If I take an example, normally the perch haven't seen everything. There is always something you can do and something you can try that they haven't seen. It's like fishing in normal. It's trends. Someone catches on a chatterbait, everyone is using chatterbait. Someone is catching on jerkbait, or everyone is using jerkbait. But there is always something different to try. But a good example, I think, is from this year, 2025, in the spring when I was fishing in Holland. It was by far the most difficult year ever I fished in Holland. There were less perch than normal, and they were in not so good condition, the fish we caught. And the first few days we fished, we really struggled. It was really, really difficult fishing. We caught a few fish, but nothing consistent. And then we started fishing smaller and smaller Ned worms. We had last year in fresh memory when we caught loads and loads and loads of big perch on Carolina and a 6.5 centimeter creek craw, but they just wouldn't touch that bait again. Not a bite, not a fish, nothing on it. So we started fishing Ned worms, and we started fishing smaller and smaller and smaller Ned worms. So in the end, it was like 7 centimeter, our normal Ned worm is 7 centimeter, or even better, the Ned worm slim in 5.5 centimeter. They were the key to the fishing this spring in Holland. And as I said before, also not jumping them on the bottom, just dragging them slowly, pause, dragging, pause, dragging, pause. That was the only way we could catch them in the end. They were so tricky, extremely tricky.
With the hopping then, what do you think that is? It actually signals danger maybe? It's too much, like the natural stuff that they're feeding on probably doesn't do that. Is much more slowly just grubbing along, so it appears a lot more natural.
Yeah, it could be, and it can also be if they remember they've been caught on that jumping stuff before, so it's danger to them. I don't know. When we started fishing the Ned worms, I fished them quite aggressively. Bigger heads, bigger worms, really fishing them, jumping them home, but it just didn't work this year. So I think it could be a fishing pressure, a lot of fishing pressure so I'm very excited to see what's going to happen next year in 2026. Maybe it's back to normal again, who knows? But yeah, the fishing pressure you have in these waters is extreme. I've never seen anything like it. It's big waters, but the way people are fishing now with a live scope in every boat, it feels like the perch never get left alone. They are under pressure all the time.
Mm.
Sometimes you come to a spot and you see there are fish. You can see there are 3, 4, 5 fish on the side view, but you can't catch a fish. But you don't know, maybe there's already been 1 or 2 or 3 boats fishing that spot before, the same day. So they are under extreme pressure, these fish.
Well, that brings us on to one other question that I've actually got here, which is, Holland has been famously getting better and better and better over the last 5 years. Everyone used to want a 50 centimeter perch, and then it seemed like a couple of years ago they were almost everywhere. 51s, 2s, 3s, and all of these huge fish. Like, is it over? Is it a year class? Do you think some of them are dying off, or is it the fishing pressure and they're wising up? But yeah, what do you think?
You can say the fishing has become better if you say more 50 centimeter perch caught. But the number of big fish caught also relates to the number of boats on the water.
Mm.
More people fishing, and most of all, more people going around with live scope. So they will catch more fish. But I think also the perch has been slowly growing every year, getting a little bit bigger. But something was different this spring. There was less fish. They were not in the same condition as they normally are. So I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see next spring if it's back to normal, if it's even more difficult. I heard rumors about a lot of perch dying. I don't know if there was a lot of perch dying. Someone should have found them on the banks. I don't know, but there were definitely less fish than normal, and they were definitely in worse condition. So something was different this spring, but it's very difficult to say what it was. Maybe there is a lot of these big old fish that has left us and died. I don't know.
They can't be 50 centimeters plus forever. They must be
No.
towards the middle to the end of their life anyway, I'd assume, when they get to that big.
You see many of these really big fish. You can see they are old. They look old and worn. But you also catch fish that are big fish that are looking very young. So, I mean, of course, every big perch would not die at the same time, but it could have been a few good years. It could be the end of a few good years. So there has been many old fish that has disappeared. I don't know. It's guessing, and I don't know. I've heard so many theories, but I haven't heard one that I really believe in. It's very very hard to say what it is. But something was different this year, that's for sure.
Well, I fished Predator Tour in June this year, and the perch were, well, it was by far the most difficult Predator Tour that's ever been. It was my first one, and I rocked up, and it was really tough. But out of the 3 species that we need for perch, pike, and zander, the perch were the most difficult as well, by far. Like really experienced guys struggling to find any sort of perch, you know. But
it seems like there is less fish, that's for sure.
But on the subject of how long does a perch live for, or how long does it live for at maybe its biggest size, you've actually got a great story about a particular unique fish, haven't you, that we spoke about previously, but I think the viewers are going to love this one. So do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly. Normally, you don't often hear people talking about recaptures when it comes to perch. When it comes to carp and pike, you in some waters people know every fish swimming in the lake, but you don't hear much talk about recaps when it comes to perch. And I think it's because of the perch, they look quite similar, so it's not always so easy to recognize a special individual, and people maybe not care so much. But of course, I've seen recaptures before, but that is normally you've caught one fish again that you recognize, but it's not something you hear very much about. But there is a quite funny story from Holland. In 2015, my friend Luke Coppens, he caught a very impressive perch. I can't remember the length, but I think it was 49 or something. It was 2 kilos and 750 grams, 2.75 kilos. He caught a big, massive fish. It was not very long, but it was absolutely massive. And he caught it on a 12 centimeter shad teeth in the color of fish roach, in a very specific spot, a small stone structure that often produce 1, 2, 3 big fish if you left it alone and not fished it too hard. The year after, I catch the same perch on exactly the same spot. It was 49.5 centimeter. It was 2.71 kilo. And I caught it on a 9 centimeter shad teeth in the color of fish roach.
Okay.
It was, you have it on a picture you can put up later. If you look at the way this fish is built, it's very special because it's extremely high in the body. And you can see the tail has some kind of damage on the top, the tail fin. So it's quite easy to recognize. So that was pretty cool. We've caught the same perch 2 years in a row and in exactly the same spot. And in very much the same time of the year, in March, in the middle of or end of March. But that's not the end. The year after, 2017, we have a friend in the boat who catches the same fish again for the third time.
Not in the same spot?
In exactly the same spot on a 9 centimeter shad tease. I can't remember the color. And this time it was smaller. It was 2.4 kilo something. So it was definitely going downhill. This fish had probably seen its best days and was getting old and losing weight. But the crazy thing is 3 years in a row we catch the same fish in the same small spot in a huge lake, absolutely huge lake. This perch returns to the same little spot every spring to spawn. That is pretty crazy.
Excellent. I love that. Well, again, it's interesting to know, you know, I always assumed that maybe they live for 1 or maybe 2 years when they've maxed out. I mean, how long does a perch live for? 20 years, 15 years?
I think they can live for 18, 20 years. But I also think if they grow extremely fast, they don't get as old as they can get if they grow in normal speed.
Do you think in Holland they're fast growers?
I think they grow very fast. They must do to get that big. So I think it could. There's nothing done to this about researches and things, but there's been a lot of research done for salmon, for example. They return back to the same river and spawn where they were born, the same river they were born. And I would not be surprised they have done a little bit of research on pike that goes up into rivers from the Baltic Sea. They go back to the same river where they were born. And I think it's the same with other fish like bream and eyed and perch. They return to the same river where they were born once. And who knows, maybe it's the same in a lake, that the perch returned to the area where it was born. I don't know, but it's quite interesting that this huge perch returned to the same little spot for at least 3 years in a row.
And he loved a shad tease by the sounds of it as well.
Exactly. It's crazy, huh? In a lake that is so big, it finds back to this little spot every spring.
Wow. Well, I had one from this year, actually. I caught a 50 centimeter plus fish, and it had a black mark on its cheek and a little, just near the dorsal fin, a little red mark. And yeah, caught it. Fantastic fish. Another 50 centimeter pluser in the UK, which is, they're pretty rare over here. 3 hours later, my mate caught it. We're on the same boat. Caught the same fish twice in 3 hours, and it's a big old wise one as well. We couldn't believe it. I said, oh, when it went in the net the second time, oh, look, it's got a black cheek. And then we went, oh, hang on, it's got a red mark there as well. And we put it on the measure. I was like, oh, it's the same fish in 3 hours. So yeah, crazy. But wow, that's a cool story. Really cool story. Right, let's move on. Here's a good one, because I know you've mentioned Luke Coppens and Toon and maybe a couple of other people, Dion. Who is the best perch angler you've ever fished with?
Oh,
that's a good question.
That's a difficult question. I have fished with so many good anglers, and they can be good in many different ways. Luke, when it comes to knowledge about the water and stuff. Toon, when it comes to energy and enthusiasm and trying things. And Jeroen Eisens is another guy in our team who's an excellent fisherman. You are a very good angler, of course. So it's not easy to pinpoint why. It's not fair to say one guy. I've fished with so many good anglers, and We have another guy in the team, Kevin, from Holland, Hoppenbrouwers. He's fantastic angler also. Not easy. I cannot say just one name. I've fished with too many good anglers.
And I assume learn cool stuff off all of them. That's the best bit about our team, is that we've all got these different experiences and we can all pick these little, we're all so fascinated with it, and everyone's got a different little knowledge set, and we can learn stuff off each other. It's so great.
Yeah, I mean, I've been fishing for many years with also a guy in our team, Dejan Milosevic, and he lives close to this archipelago fishing, so he has a lot of experience there. And we fished together many years, and we learned so much from each other. And that's what I like about fishing and fishing with different people. Is you have the same passion and you have different angles to things, and it's always very interesting to fish with new people if you are on the same wavelength.
Absolutely, I definitely agree with that. So, I can't quite. I thought you might give us a 1 above everyone else, but you've been diplomatic, but you've name dropped a few.
I feel it's not fair to just say one, because there are so many good anglers out there.
Fair enough. Right, let's go for another question then. Big perch in clear water, stealth mode or power fishing?
I was just going to say speed, but I think you can catch on both. Really finesse fishing, and I think in the summer, if you're fishing crankbaits or bladed jigs, chatterbaits with speed and a lot of vibration and stuff, that can be a good method. But also the finesse style, small madworms and stuff. I forgot to say before, when we talked about the fishing in Holland this spring, that was tricky. We used small lures, but another thing that we used were thin leaders. We did not only start to fish with really small lures, we started to fish with longer leaders. Instead of just half a meter of fluorocarbon, we used 3-4 meters of fluorocarbon. And we scaled down to I normally use, if there is big perch, I will not normally go below 0.30 millimeter.
Yeah.
But we were down to 0.20 millimeter. So really thin lines and thin leaders and longer leaders. And of course, you cannot prove that it was, but I think we saw an improvement in the fishing when we scaled down the lures and scaled down and longer, using longer leaders.
Oh, that's well.
So
and okay, so if you're then scaling down to the smaller baits, that you obviously need smaller hooks, you've got lighter lines, same rod still, or are you stepping down a little bit on rods?
I prefer to step down a little bit if I have the possibility. Yeah. I think our finesse TNC rod, 5 to 15 gram, is an excellent rod for light perch fishing. But if I'm traveling and maybe there is no possibility to bring many rods, and if I should use one rod for all round perch fishing, and that is chatterbaits, drop by spin tails, crankbaits, paddle tails, finesse nedworm, I love the W10 finesse TNC.
Yeah.
Because it's such a good all-round rod. I have fished everything with that rod. I fished these small nedworms, super finesse, and I have fished bladed jigs and crankbaits and everything with this rod. So it's super sensitive and it's light, so you can fish with it the whole day without problems, and maybe changing to a thinner line if you go finesse, but it's such a good all-round rod. I can fish everything with that rod if I want, if I need, if I cannot bring many rods and change equipment for. So if I can, I would step down to a lighter rod. But if I don't have that possibility, I don't mind fishing the W10 Finesse TNC rod.
Oh, what a piece of kit. All right then, just to not put you on the spot as such, but we've obviously got rods all the way from W2 through to W10, and our Finesse TNC, as one of the most popular rods in our range, goes all the way through. W2, W3, W4, W6, 8, 10, etc. When the W2s came out, in terms of value for money, I think they're absolutely brilliant. I don't know about you if you've used them much, but I've used a lot of the W2s and 3s, and I've also got a W10. The 10 is standalone in terms of crispness, lightness, etc., etc. But the action is still very, very similar, even in the cheaper rods. Are you still prepared to? Do you still use 2s and 3s in your fishing? What's your thoughts on that?
To be honest, I haven't used the W2 only when I've been testing them.
Yeah.
I don't have them in my arsenal, but I fished a lot with the W3s.
Yeah.
They were the first to come out. They were the first ones we brought out was the W3 series. So I fished with them for several years before we brought out W6. But once I've had a W6 TNC rod in my hand, I just couldn't go back. It was. But I fished a lot with the W3, and they are excellent rods for that money. Excellent rods.
Well, I've done a bit with the W2s, and I must admit, I remember talking to our rod designers back in the day, and I did say to him, you've got a big job on your hands, because if you bring a W2 rod out that's around the kind of, 80, 90 euro mark, something like that, and the guys don't get behind it, the Dietmar's, Toon, Luke, Jörgen, Radek, whoever in the team, then I think it'll be tricky to sell them, because we have to believe in all of the products. And it was risky, but I remember pulling a W2 out for the first time, and I thought, how did they do this? How have they made a rod that is this good for this money? So I still use, there's a couple of W2s that I use in the range, and I'm happy to, but I love the W10s and 8s and 6s as well. But for anyone out there on a budget that's getting into their perch fishing, I will happily put my name on the W2 range. If you're on a budget or anything like that, you can trust those rods. They are absolutely fantastic for the money.
For that price, they are spot on. Perfect starting rod if you want to try perch fishing, and very, very good all-round rod. You can use it for most techniques and most lures. I was thinking about another thing, Tom, when we touched that about fishing in extremely clear water before. One thing that you don't hear so many people talking about is we always talk about lures and methods and stuff, so it's easy to forget. But one key to fishing clear waters is the time of the day. Mm-hmm. Normally, especially when it's the warm period of the year, the morning and evenings are normally the best times to catch perch, especially big perch. And in clear water, it's even clearer that the morning hours and the evening hours is the time to target the bigger fish in the clear water. They are more active when the light is a little bit dampened.
Yeah.
So fishing the right time is also important when you're fishing clear waters. And even in the winter time, I mean, we've seen in the archipelago, we saw it the day we caught the fish on jerk bites. You can have a good day, you can catch a few fish, but even in the middle of the winter, there can be a feeding period just when the light is getting low and it's getting a little bit dark. It's very often you get a feeding period when the light is getting it's getting a little bit darker. So feeding time, little bit darker mornings and evenings is always worth checking out.
Yeah, definitely in clear water. Well, that leads us on to the next question, and probably one of our last ones as well for the Q&A section, is the opposite end. How do you tackle coloured water? And I'm going to define this slightly differently. So the first part of the question, I'd love to hear you talk about coloured water that is coloured most of the time. So that's the normal state of the water. And if there's any differences to, say, coloured water, but when it might be a river that's got a lot of colour in, but most of the time is normal. You know, there's some visibility to it, and then suddenly it gets coloured. I'd love to hear your thoughts on both of those.
One type of water that is colored, maybe not so much in the winter time, but in the summertime, is extremely rich waters that get these algae blooms. You find them here in Sweden and you find them in Holland, and I suppose you have them in England also. Really, really rich waters that will have algae blooms in the summer, and when it's calm weather, the surface is covered with these green algae, and it when the wind is on this water, this algae is mixed up in the water, so you can see there are small particles, algae in the water, and I don't find that type of water. It seems like there's still a lot of light coming through, even if you think it should be pitch black there when you have this algae mat on the surface, because I don't find that really strong colors like fluorescent colors are necessarily better. I have but I have a few waters like this that natural colors work fine. In Holland, it can work fine with natural colors, but also with the brighter colors, fluorescent colors in this type of waters. So I don't know. I haven't really. You have another type of water in Sweden where is this brownish color, but they look like they are very colored, but the light is still the light still seems to go through this kind of water. So it's the same experience that normally it's natural color that works best for the lures.
Yeah. So that's an interesting, what you've just described there. They get in Ireland quite a lot as well, which is what I call quite peaty water. So it's dark water, but it's actually clear still, or clear-ish, and it's what I describe as tea without the milk in it. So it's like it's got that dark peaty tea color to it, and like
these rich waters with a lot of algae blooms. They often are in farm country. They're often farmland around them, and they get these algae blooms a lot.
And then what about a river? So a river that's then, you know, maybe it's in flood and it's got a lot of cloudiness, more like tea with the milk in it, you know, so visibility might only be a few inches.
Actually, we have fished quite a lot in that conditions. Me and a friend have fished the river for many years, and it's quite a few years now since we found out that the best fishing was always after a flood when the water was murky. We always had the best fishing. Yeah, we always had the best fishing when the water was not super colored. We say the visibility of 10 to 20 centimeters, 10 to 30 centimeters. You can see there is still a lot of color in the water, but not extreme, not like coffee with milk, but a little bit. When it starts to clear a little bit from the flood, that's when you should go on the river. And we've had some fantastic fishing in these conditions. And that's another thing we've kept quiet, because all the other anglers stay away because they don't like the murky water. But that's when we went to the river and had our best fishing.
We call that fining down, just as it's just starting. And what do you think that is? Is that a case of it's been so coloured and so full of water, the river, that they physically can't feed for a couple of days, and then they're just hungry, and that's the first opportunity that they can go and start hunting again?
Yeah, yeah, and I think also this flood with a lot of water and current and stuff, I think it activates them.
Yeah.
Maybe they're like some standing in an area and very inactive, and when this flood is coming, it activates them.
Well,
I can show you some of the lures we have been using when we're fishing these murky rivers.
yeah, please do.
If I can find them. I don't have all of them here, but I have some. The only thing we have done when fishing in these conditions is to choose lure with bright colors.
Green
Paddle
tomato,
tails.
that's the favorite.
That's a very good color in murky water, green tomato, and that is the fire perch, also a bright color, also good in murky water. See if I have anything else here. I'm not fishing that much with this bright color, so I don't have. I have a special box for the murky river with some. I'm gonna find it and show it to you. Here is the river box. Or maybe not. Yeah, here is our favorite color from murky water. This is an old limited edition color we brought out many years ago.
What's the name?
Yeah, what's the name? That's a good question.
I think that might be a
I
secret,
can't
Jörgen.
remember the name, but as you see, it's like this green, yellow, orange fluorescent colors.
Yeah.
But I mean the common thing with these lures is they're bright. They're really bright. And in these flood conditions, it's more or less the only or one of few times when I'm fishing with this type of lures. It's when the rivers are really murky. Normally I go for a little bit more discreet and natural colors, but when you go to the river and in flood, it's definitely these type of lures that are doing the business.
Absolutely. Well,
So important paddle tails and bright colors. That has been our solution to the murky water in the rivers, and we've had some fantastic fishing in that conditions. And as I said before, it seems like the changes with the water level and the currents and everything, it activates the perch.
gets them hungry. So yeah, pick it. This is, I think everyone thinks the secret juice is always in the lure or you know, the bit of equipment, but just as much it's watercraft and knowing when to go, picking the right day, keeping an eye on the conditions and the river, you know.
I agree.
So right guys, that leads us on really nicely to our final section, which is I asked Jörgen to prepare 10 lures, his top 10 lures for us. So we're going to go through them now. Right then, Jörgen, take us through and it can be in any order, and I'm sure there's quite a bit of variety you've got here in the top 10. But I wanted you to include colours, trailers, if a trailer is on, you know, if one of them might be a blade bite, I'm guessing maybe, not too sure. But yeah, what have you got for us and where are you going to start?
I'm going to start with the obvious one, the 9 centimeter shad teeth.
Yeah.
It's very hard to pass this lure because if you have used it for many years and if you have seen what other people have caught on it, this lure is just a legend when it comes to big fish, and it's not only perch. I mean, it has caught a crazy amount of big pikes. You mentioned it before. Your favorite lure is a 10 centimeter shad teeth.
Yeah.
This is the normal 9 centimeter with a higher body. And it has caught so many big pikes, sanders, and perch through years. there are something special with this lure when it comes to big pike and zander and perch. It's a fantastic lure. Absolutely fantastic.
And if I pressed you on a colour, what have you got there? Is that headlight? Would that be a winner?
It's the legendary headlight color, of course. I would say that headlight works in almost every water. It's not the top color in all waters, but it will work in 99% of the waters. In many waters, it will be the top color. You're never wrong if you put the headlight on.
Definitely agree
So
with that one.
But I have many favorite colors depending on where I'm fishing. I like the official roach; it's a fantastic color. Bass orange is another color that is maybe not so popular, but I think it can be a fantastic color also. So there are many good colors in the range, Chattee's range.
Superb. Go on then. What about
So
number two?
Number two will be Stanley the Stickleback. Everyone that knows me knows that I also love Stanley, and for perch I prefer the 7.5 centimeter one. For some reason, that is the size I catch most big perch on. It's quite interesting because when we release this lure, we can say it has a very tight, fast vibration, tail vibration. The action is completely different to Chattee's. It's a more tighter and more erratic action on the Stanley the Stickleback. And when we brought out this lure, I was sure it would be a fantastic summer and autumn lure for perch. But it turned out this bloody lure is working all year round. I've had fantastic fishing on Stanley the Stickleback in late autumn. I've caught big perch in the early spring and winter. It works all the time. And there is another thing with Stanley, and I suppose it's because of the action. It tends to activate the perch. Many times I've been fishing a spot with other lures without catching anything special, and when I put on a Stanley, they're starting to come. Seems like it activates the perch.
Oh, interesting.
So if you haven't tried Stanley the Stickleback, I can really recommend it because it can be absolutely fantastic, and we have some good colors in the range also. This is the motor oil color. It's one of my favorite colors in the archipelago, but there are many nice colors.
And with
And
that bait,
7.5.
with that bait in particular, because I know that you're a huge fan of it, I kind of used to be, and it's a lure that I don't maybe necessarily go back to a huge amount anymore, just as you cycle through them. But with that bait, is it really anything to do with the fact that it looks like a stickleback, or is it more to do with it's just got its own unique action and paddle tail action?
I would guess it's because of the action. I don't think it's because of its stickleback shape. I think it's the action. Number three is another old favorite that has been in the program for a long time. It's the 9 centimeter hypothese. This is also a lure that I bring out when the fishing is tough. It's my favorite soft lure for fishing in cold water, late autumn, winter. This lure can be fantastic. And as you see, I fish it on a jig head with offset hook. It's a very good lure to rig on an offset hook.
Yeah.
So this is a magical lure in the archipelago when it's cold in the water. And especially this color, Dirty Harbor.
Well, the first perch I ever caught in the archipelago with you, and it took me a number of hours, was on that exact bait. 9 centimeters, offset jig head, and Dirty Harbor. Cracking lure. Love the hypothese.
Very, very good. Number 4 will be the good old bull tease. these lures, the hypotees and the bulltees, they are rigged with offset jig head. That's because I use them a lot in the archipelago. But of course, they work fine to fish with a traditional jig head also. But this is also a very, very good lure for the cold water fishing in the archipelago. And this is one of my favorite colors, the UV Craw. Has been fantastic, especially when it's a little bit dark conditions, cloudy and morning evenings. Bulltees is a great lure. Can you also be fished with a normal jig head in the summer, of course, and also a great soft lure with a little bit wider profile. As you can see, it's got a little bit wider body.
And a little bit more, I'd say a little bit more aggressive action as well. When you've got Stanley's quite tight and he sits upright. Hypotees has got like a tail waggle. The Shad Tees has got the body roll. So they're all different.
Yeah. I forgot to mention the Hypotees has a very wide tail action. So it's very special, and I think this calm, if you can call it calm, this calm action suits the cold water very well. Mm-hmm. So it's I've used it for many years, and it's still one of my favorites for this cold water fishing. But as you said, all these lures have different action, and it's no point having 20 different paddle tails with the same action in your box. It's finding lures with different purposes and different action that might solve your problem that day. One day they want the 9 centimeter Shad Tees with a lot of body roll, and the next day they want Stanley with a lot of tight, fast tail action, and next day they want the Hypotees with a wide, slower action. So they all have a purpose. And then you come to some days when the perch don't want to have a paddle tail for some reason. It's just as it's too much for them. They don't want it. They don't want Shad Tees, they don't want Stanley, they don't want the paddle tail. Then I bring out another favorite, and that is the ring tees curl tail.
Yeah.
Another lure that I have caught so many big perch on, and it's very special because when this lure is right, when it's working, it's outstanding. You cannot find anything else that can compete with it, or it will not work at all. So it's either it's the number one lure or it's not working at all. But if you have a day when it's working, you cannot find anything that can compete with it.
Oh, really? And it's not a bait I use a huge amount. Like, it seems very soft. Like, the rings give the profile, but then it folds. It's very soft to fold easily.
Once again, rigged on an offset jig head for the shallow water. Very light jig head. I fished them on 3 and 5 gram jig heads. Shallow water, weed in the archipelago. But it's also a very good lure in lakes when the perch don't want the paddle tail. It can be great. I have friends fishing a lot of lake perch, and they also use it for the same purpose as I do when they don't want anything else. It can be a great, and it's also very versatile. You can fish it on a jig head like this. You can fish it on a Carolina rig. You can fish it on drop shot. I fished a lot Neko rigging it. So it's very versatile lure.
Brilliant.
And my last soft lure will, of course, be a Nedworm.
Yeah. I was waiting for that one.
You can't be without the Nedworm. That's the way it is. The size you have to experiment with. Some days they want the big one, and some days they want the small one. But a Nedworm is, a must-have in your books. Different sizes, different colors. You normally find someone that is working when they don't want anything else. Rig it on a traditional Ned head, or try a Sheb head. This is with a normal single hook where it's no weed and stuff. I use it with a bare hook like this. Mm-hmm. You can of course use it with an offset hook also. Here is the small Nedworm Slim rigged on our Sheb head. It's more like a little sled that you can drag along the bottom. but very versatile also. You can fish it in many different ways. So that was my soft lures.
How many was that? Was that 6 soft baits?
Yeah, 6 different soft baits.
Yeah.
Then we go to the hard lures, the crankbaits and stuff. And my first choice will be, not surprising, buzz bite.
Yeah.
And as I said before, I'm using all sizes. I'm using the 4 centimeter, the 5, the 6, and the 6.5 centimeter. I use all the sizes depending on the depth where I'm fishing. And this lure has a very tight, hard action and makes a lot of noise. It has rattle balls inside. And the hooks and everything, when it's vibrating, it sends out a lot of sound and vibration in the water. And it's this classical tight action that the perch normally love. So this is my number one crankbait for perch. And as I've said before also, I use the shallow runner in the archipelago also when I'm fishing really, really shallow above the weed in half a meter or something. So I use all the models of buzz bite that we have in the program.
Yeah, very versatile.
Extremely good lure. Then another one I've shown you before, the raw bite is a completely different action in the water if you compare it to buzz bite. It has a much wider swimming action. And some days it's deadly in the archipelago and in shallow water. It runs about 1.5 meter, so it can be used in lakes and stuff also. Also with a lot of sound. So once again, 2 completely different actions.
Yeah.
If you compare the buzz bite to the raw bite. The next one will be the jerk bite. And once again, I use most of the models. Fishing really shallow in the archipelago above the weed, I use the 7.5 centimeter, the small one. Can be absolutely deadly. And then if I want to go a little bit deeper, I go to the 9 centimeter model. Then we have a 9 centimeter medium runner that goes a little bit deeper. You see it has a little bit bigger lip. And of course, the bigger model, the 11 centimeter, also a super killer for. That was the one we used when you were with me in the archipelago, was the 11 centimeter.
Yeah, incredible bait.
So jerk bite or bait is a must in the books, that's for sure. And the last one is also one I've showed you before. It's the drop bite.
Oh yes, yeah.
I have used it a lot the last years and I've got more and more confidence in it. And as I said before, I like the plastic one with zinc weight because it has a lower density, and compared to the weight of a tungsten one, you get a bigger size. And I have many waters where I want to get away from the small baby perch. So I want these bigger models to get away from at least some of the small perch, and you can fish it slower also. I normally fish this lure as slow as I can. I immediately when I feel the blade is starting to rotate, I just keep that slow speed. And sometimes I make a spin stop so it goes to the bottom and then starts again. And often they will follow and knock the lure, so it's quite exciting fishing. You feel when it's bigger perch because they knock it so hard, and then suddenly it just stops in the water when they take it. So that's a very good search lure also. When it's a little bit warmer in the water, you will find the fish with the drop bite.
Well,
and the drop bite, you also have many sizes, and you have both the plastic one and the tungsten one, so you can experiment a lot. I fished in waters where there's not so much small perch. Then the small tungsten models can be deadly also. But the only problem I find with the tungsten ones, the small ones, the treble hook is so small, it's so easy to lose the fish. That's
Yeah.
another reason why I like the bigger ones. And as you can see here, I've even put on a bigger size hook. You see the hook is almost oversized for the lure, but that is also to lose less fish. So that was my 10 top lures, but we have so many good lures in the program. It's extremely difficult to only choose 10. We've seen the creek craw before, and now with these rubber skirts, I feel that it will bring a new dimension to my fishing in some waters, in some situations, and it's often finding the right lure in the right situation, and yeah, having lures that is doing different things. Having different paddle tails that have different action, having crankbaits with different action. It's no point having 20 lures with the same action. It's having lures with that can do different things. And of course, the creek craw we've caught so much big fish on it. Sometimes the small 6.5 centimeter one, and sometimes they want a big mouthful with an 8.5 centimeter. That's quite a meaty bait. I mean, with the skirt also, it's even bigger. That's can be a killer lure. And then we have combinations of the Ned worm you can play around with and put skirt material on them. Can be very good. Here is one. I've done my own Ned head with a skirt on. So that you can also experiment with some of the lures and make them to give another kind of presentation. That's the fun part of the perch fishing. It just never ends. You can experiment so much with different techniques and different lures, and that's the fascinating thing with perch. And of course, never forget the Cheburasca with a Ned worm that you get. That has definitely been my favorite since the Ned worm came out, fishing it on the Cheb head.
Well, I think that's fantastic. That's an incredible top 10. Arguably, we could go to a top 15 or even a top 20. But I think one of the main things that I would like to echo is have variety in your box. Like you've said, don't just make it soft plastics. Have some hard baits, have some metal baits, have some spin baits, some different vibration baits, some curl tails, some paddle tails. It's the variety in your box that's really going to get you out of jail on most days.
It was difficult to pass the blade bite, our chatterbait, for example. I had it in my hand, but I had to be hard when choosing this favorite lures, and
When there's
that is
only
also
10.
a lure that can change the day completely because it's so violent with the vibrations and everything. It can be fantastic some days.
Absolutely. Well, we're
And
going...
another thing I think is worth talking about as a ending. We talked a lot about Carolina rigs,
Yeah.
and I normally fish my Carolina rigs with these rubber stops.
Oh,
These
yes.
rubber stops, they are for braided lines, so they sit very tight on a fluorocarbon. And if you put two on, it will hold even when you push for long casts, it will not move if you put two of them on the leader. And another thing, if you wet them, you can move them easily and adjust the length of your leader. And you get 2 knots less if you use them. You don't have a swivel with 2 knots. You have the rubber stops instead. And when I come to a new water that has, what do you say, a water with no fishing pressure,
Yeah.
I expect the perch to be a little bit more greedy and not shyer. I use the beads, the famous clacking beads you have on the Carolina, and maybe a little bit oversized weight to get more sound and stuff. And I'm dragging it on the bottom, the beads and the heavy tungsten weight creates a lot of sound and stuff in the bottom. So I go a little bit heavier. Maybe it could have been enough with a 7-gram weight, but I use a 14-gram instead to create more sound and stuff. And if I fish water with a lot of pressure, I take away the beads completely and fish without beads.
Silent style.
Yeah, to get away from the sound, because the perch, I've heard that many times when they've been caught, and only use a weight instead. No beads at all, and a smaller weight.
Well, Jörgen, I think that probably brings us to the end of our Mammoth Perch podcast, and I actually think there could be another hour in this, but it's been a long day already.
Could be more.
It's that was absolutely fantastic, and I loved that little section at the end, 10 top baits, because there's so many details amongst all those tiny little differences. So I wanted to say thank you, but you guys at home, I really want you to say thank you in the comments as well. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you think it's too long or too short, or you've got your own comments around various things that have popped up in the podcast, please comment, because we want this to be an ongoing conversation. And likewise, if you've got any suggestions of who you might want up next, please put it in the comments. So, Jörgen, thank you very much from me, and I hope you enjoyed yourself.
I did. And as I said, we could have continued a few more hours. It's no problem. But thank you so much for this podcast interview. And I hope the viewers like it. We'll see.
Oh, I think they're going to love it. They're definitely going to love it. So, brilliant. All right, Jörgen, you can have your day back now, because I've stolen you pretty much all day. What a mammoth it's been. And to you guys at home, drop your comments in, give us a thumbs up, and I'll see you on the next one.